Let me just reset my track IR. This little thing is so fun. This is the Mini 500 by Got Friends. Let's see if I've got... Yeah, those are all on dome lights so I can see the cockpit a little better. Let's go. Western helicopter is left pedal, I think? Left pedal and back left stick? Yep. A little too much pedal. Wait, we're a bit drunk. Been a while since I've flown it. Good default helicopters yet? The Cabri, the Gimbal Cabri, which is a default helicopter, is quite good. The 407 that Nemeth did, which is, you know, it's official under Microsoft, but Nemeth did it on contract. It needs a lot of fixing for the flight model. But the Cabri's good. The native flight model is quite decent. There are some third parties that have made good use of it. Cowan Sim has some pretty decent stuff. That there's still some tweaking to be done, but they're generally good. We want to go northeast. This is running on the native flight model, but with some external code they've added for things like retreating blade stall and VRS. At least I think that's part of the external code. There's a few other things they had to add external for. Generally speaking, helicopters in this are getting pretty good. Airland FS, which is what you're talking about, the app you had to use before, was less than ideal even at the time, and now it's just obsolete. No reason to use it anymore. In fact, I think the guy that made Airland FS, and also made a Robinson for it, has transferred that Robinson over to the native flight model. Apparently it's quite good, but I cannot figure out why I can't get it off the ground. I think I need to rebind something. Because I think the SimVar it uses for the collective is specifically named something that my throttle's not bound to. Because I don't use a separate control setup for helicopters, I just rely on the fact that most of the native helicopters use throttle inputs to translate across as collective inputs. So I don't have a separate collective bind from memory. Oh no, I do, sorry, but I think if you have both bound, then it doesn't work properly. You need to have the throttle unbound for it to work. What is this heli called? It's a Mini 500, because it's basically a downsized single-seat MD 500. Didn't realise how hilly it was down here. The last time I flew around this area was in the Grumman Goose. And I was a little higher up, so I didn't realise this is actually rolling hills. I thought it was mostly flat swampland. It's the ancestral homeland. Part of my family are from this area. Before the really bad Tsarist pogroms in the early 20th century, so they bailed to the UK. It's the thing that YouTuber started up in a shed. I'm not sure, I haven't seen the video you're referencing. Might be, don't know. It's quite a nice little helicopter. As far as I know, by the way, I don't think anyone's added it, either through custom coding or otherwise. I don't think there's force trim in Misfizz yet. There's only beep trim. So you basically trim everything like you trim the hind, well, you can trim the hind like that usually even. But, you know, use the trim hat and dial it in by hand with your thumb. You can't just hold a button, move the cyclic, and then let it go, which is kind of annoying. I hope they implement that at some point, not just for this, but for all the helicopters in general, because that is generally how helicopters are trimmed. 2 gauges at Pepe awake state below altimeter. You are correct. That is interesting. Why are they not working? I wonder if something's broken a gauge. That's really weird. Is that on? Should be on. Fuel pumps on. Yeah, okay, so that's on by default. Doors, landing lights. I could take the doors off. It'd be really loud in here, but it sounds good. Like so. We'll put them back on though, so you guys can hear me a little better. Landing lights, avionics. The avionics switch puts on a Garmin unit, like one of the fucking G1000s or whatever it is. I don't want that shit in my helicopter, so fuck it. I think the gauge isn't displaying correctly. I might have fucked up when I updated this thing this morning, because there was a patch and I just kind of slapped it over the existing files. You're probably meant to delete the existing files. Oops. It's fine. It's fine, we'll be fine. So... Ignalina should be pretty easy to spot once we get close to it. It's quite big. But we've got a ways to fly before we get there. It's not as close as you'd think. I'm very good at underestimating distances on the world map. I'm also very good at not paying attention to the compass. And getting further from where I should be going. It's up around here, I think, from memory. So we'll just head north-ish from here. It's pretty much right near the border, so if we just head towards the border, we should be right. The blade slapping audio you hear is from FS Realistic. I don't remember if this has native blade slap audio. I don't think it does, or if it does, it triggers a lot more subtly. I do feel maybe FS Realistic overdoes the blade slap a little, so I might turn that off at some point. I'm not even pulling full collective at the moment. I'm pulling like maybe half collective, so it's not even like I'm running it that hard. I think I see it. Big fucking thing sticking out of the tree line. That looks like a chimney. That's where they're going. So, if you guys are looking to get into helicopters in Misfizz, I strongly recommend this. This is the Got Friends Mini 500. It's available on the Got Friends website for, was it like 15 bucks or something? It's super cheap, especially with how detailed it is. It's a simple helicopter in terms of systems, obviously, but they've modelled, like I said, retreating blade stall, they've modelled vortex ring state. As far as I know, it's the only helicopter in Misfizz that does model those things at the moment. Because Asobra haven't added their native implementation yet, and I don't think any of the other devs have... Fly Inside might have made their own, because they run everything externally. Like, they have a completely external flight model to the sim. But, like, the Cow Sim ones don't have it yet, for instance. Although they do have quite decent flight models in other respects. To be fair, if you aren't flying the helicopter like a monkey, VRS and RBS are kind of not the be-all end-all of good flight modeling like people make out. So Eric Scott, the guy who made the Gazelle flight model sort of evaluation video for DCS, he did another video about the Blackhawk mod, the UH-60L mod for DCS, and he was talking about the flight modeling, and one of the things he said is, it doesn't really matter if the sim models retreating blade stall or particularly VRS. It's good if it does, but it isn't what gives you a good flight model. What gives you a good flight model is the aircraft performing the way the real thing does in, you know, normal flight situations. If it performs the same way out of envelope, that's even better, but it's, you know, you can't just tack on out of envelope behaviors to an aircraft when the basic flight model doesn't match the numbers anyway, and doesn't match how it should be. I think we got debated. That's a water tower. We're looking for a lake, because it's right on a lake. Obviously, you need a lot of water for a nuclear power plant. And we're looking for a chimney. It's a very distinctive chimney. I had a nickel for every time my hobby knife fell off my desk and onto my legs. Oh, yeah. I would recommend you stop trying your luck with that, to be honest. That doesn't sound like a good time. Worse still, if it misses your legs and hits something else. No thank you. This weather's beautiful. This is just live weather. Gorgeous morning. Now, live time, it's probably like 10 PM or something, but this sunrise and these clouds over rural eastern Lithuania. Yeah, that is a water tower. Now, it is a lake around here somewhere. The problem is I don't remember which exact lake. There's no real good landmarks nearby that I can use to... I see 2 large buildings. That might be it. In fact, yeah, I'd say that's it there. I see the chimney. Well, the chimneys. That's Ignalina right there. You guys probably can't see it. It's just a slight bit right of the compass. So we'll head for it. More rotors for extra lift, yeah. Just give me a Kamov. There is a Kamov in the sim, a Car 10, which was, I think, the first Kamov coaxial rotor helicopter, or one of the first. It was designed as a Navy Scout helicopter, so it's a cute little thing. It's basically a flying bike frame with a little, like, lawnmower engine, coaxial rotors, and a little gas tank off, like, a mower or a small car or something, and big pair of pontoon floats. I have flown that on stream before. You know what? Maybe we'll fly it again today. I think it runs off the native flight model now. It used to have its own separate external one. I'm not sure how detailed the flight model is. I've never really pushed it to its limits, and I have no documentation for the real thing to compare to, but it's a great little helicopter. It's like $10, and it frequently goes on sale for even less. It comes with not just the Car 10, the helicopter itself, it comes with the fucking Kuznetsov and several Kirov-class cruisers escorting it. Not just one, they're all over the place. So you can fly off the Kuznetsov off the coast of Cuba, you can fly off the Kuznetsov in the Black Sea, you can fly off it wherever the fuck you like. It adds American carriers too, because the same guy that made it made a mod for the default Asobo Super Hornet. It's probably the best value for money in the entire sim. $10 for a cool, fun little helicopter and a shit ton of add-ons for places to fly it from / around. And I think he's adding a truck that can carry it as well, like an actual truck with a trailer it used to land and take off from. Dude's just going ham. Is there a CB in Misfizz? The one for X-Plane 11 is amazing. I don't think so. There's GBs, but I don't think there's a CB. Still don't have moving carriers in Misfizz. The one for the Maverick landing challenge is moving, albeit very slowly, and it doesn't pull much of a wake, so I thought it was stationary until I watched Ultra trying to land on it. I was like, oh, it is actually moving. Just slowly and without a wake. I've got scenery add-ons that do add more ships. So the Global AI Shipping Traffic mod adds moving naval ships, but I don't think it has landable carriers yet. The Car 10 added carriers, I don't think they move. I think they can change position, like they teleport position every few hours. There's a setting to turn that on, but I don't think they actually move. But I could be wrong. I'd have to check. So yeah, like I don't know is the answer. Basically, I don't know. Like carrier landings in small, sketchy, prop-driven stuff in X-Plane, they're a challenge with the way it's cranked up. Honestly, for me, carrier landing is a challenge even in carrier planes. I'm fucking hopeless at it. Where'd my Ignalina go? I saw it just a moment ago. Oh, there it is. The, combination of the light being behind it and the anti-aliasing kind of flickering the funnels in and out makes it hard to spot, but yeah, that's it there. 2 chimneys, 2 units from memory. I think it's 2 units at Ignalina, both RBMK 1500s. So RBMK naming, well, Soviet reactor naming in general. The the letters are what type of reactor it is, and the number is the electrical power output. Not the thermal, but the actual electrical power output. So, Ignalina, a pair of RBMK 1000s, they're... RBMK stands for Large Channel Type Reactor. I'm going to butcher it if I try and say it in Russian, because Russian grammar is a fucking nightmare, but yeah, Large Channel Type Reactor. Like, reactor, probably reactor, I don't, genders, cases, fuck. But, like, reactor, большой мощность канальный. Like, reactor, high power channel. Channel type, that means. VVER is boiling water reactor, is basically what that stands for. Shane, there are two awesome World War II naval aircraft hemispheres, but no removable landing carrier. Yeah, especially like a World War II carrier. There is some nice World War II era scenery, though, for some of the island atolls in the Pacific. There's one for Midway and one for Wake Island, from memory. I think there's a few others as well. 1,000 megawatts each. So, Ignalina, pair of 1,500, so it's a 3,000 megawatt plant electrically. Chernobyl was, at time of the whoopsie, Chernobyl was 4 times 1,000, so it was a 4,000 megawatt plant. A large chunk of that was going to the Duga radar right next to it. Chernobyl was under expansion at the time of the accident. You'll see that when we fly there, but they were building units number 5 and 6. Units 1 through 4 are cooled by water outflow from, or water outflow to, it's like a big lagoon built on the Pripyat River. Reactors 5 and 6 had cooling towers. So Chernobyl does have cooling towers. It's one of very few RBMK plants that does. They're not complete, mind you, they're half built. But that was for reactors 5 and 6, which were paired up kind of southeast of the main part of the plant. I'll show you when we get there. And also, to get a bit more into the Chernobyl lore before we even get there, after the accident, the other 3 reactors were kept running, because, like, you can't replace a power plant that big very easily, so they kept the other units online. One of the blocks, I think it was block 1, had a moderate leak in, like, end of 1990 or so, and they elected to close it down and just offline that unit, because even though it wasn't a serious problem, people were, you know, you'd imagine people would react badly to hearing there's been another accident at Chernobyl. So they just quietly cleaned up and shut down Unit 1. Pretty sure it was Unit 1. It was 1 or 2. Block 2 is offline and used currently for doping silicon. I've seen videos of the inside of Block 2's reactor chamber. Bionerd23, who is very much worth following on YouTube, although I don't think she's uploaded for a while. She used to do a lot of stuff in and around the exclusion zone. I think she's a nuclear physicist of some sort. Spent a lot of time there, not just in the plant, but in the town, looking at old labs, because Pripyat, being the city for a nuclear power plant, and part of the, you know, weapons programs that's breeding plutonium for them, it has a lot of radiological labs in it. So she was exploring those. She'd just do urbexing stuff and hang out with the wildlife as well. So she's got a really good channel up. Like I said, I don't think she's uploaded anything for a while, though. Anyway, one of her friends did a full-on tour of the power plant, and they got to go into the reactor chamber of Unit 2. So that was really cool to see. Block 3, which shares a fucking wall with Block 4, the one that went high order. Block 3, I think, was the last one to be shut down in the, like, early to mid-2000s. So that plant was still outputting power into the 2000s. People don't realize that. It wasn't just cleanup crew hanging out in Chernobyl and at the new town that was built for the evacuated workers and their families, but there were people still working at the plant. Now they're all decommissioned, obviously, but the process of decommissioning a nuclear power plant is very long. Very, very long. whether or not it's had a serious accident, it just takes forever. And so there's, you know, permanent staff on site that basically babysit it, and also it's still being used, like I said, to dope silicon and other various things. Because it's sitting there, you're waiting for it to become, you know, less hot so you can get in and start dismantling it, so you may as well use it while it's there. December 2000, there we go. If you guys don't follow Fenrir, you should. He does a lot of streams where he just flies around an interesting part of the world and actually does his research, unlike me, and will tell you all about the place. So there's the power transmission lines, and there's Ignalina. Research this a few weeks ago. Nice. Well, if you feel like doing a flight in the area, there's really good free scenery for Chernobyl and Pripyat, including the radar site. And the plant had a couple of the smaller chimneys conflict with We Love VFR, but the main chimney doesn't, the iconic one doesn't. And the Duga radar no longer conflicts with it, which is good. Because the guy that made the scenery, I don't think has updated it in forever, so the guy that does, Puffin, the guy that does We Love VFR, updated it on that end instead. Oh, you did do it! Saw the radar site, nice, awesome. In the default sim scenery, the radar site is a very long, skinny apartment block. It looks very funny. Yeah, it was an over-the-horizon radar, ballistic missile warning system. There are a lot of them scattered around the former Soviet Union. Usually you won't see them in the sim because the sim will turn them into buildings. If you go to Mukachevo, which is one of the westernmost towns in Ukraine, it's right on the border with Hungary. It's like a triple border, Hungary and... I'm going to embarrass myself by fucking up my geography. Hungary and Romania, I think? Or Hungary and Moldova, maybe. But anyway, Mukachevo, not only was it home to a major Soviet airbase, but it also had several distinct generations of Soviet over-the-horizon missile warning radar and an early warning air search radar. I'm hoping someone does scenery for it at some point. So the Duga radar, they built one test example at Sari Shagan on Lake Balkhash in Kazakhstan, which is one of the Soviet test ranges for ballistic missile stuff, including the warning radars. And then they built two operational units, one at Chernobyl, well, the receiver, I think it was at Chernobyl, and the transmitter was about 50 kilometers sort of east-northeast in Chernihiv. The other one was built near Komsomolsk-na-Amur in the Far East. Again, about a 50-kilometer separation between transmitter and receiver. But the one in the east doesn't have its antenna anymore, just the buildings. So that's Ignalina. This is the turbine hall on our side here. This long, low building is the turbine hall. And then blocks 1 and 2, I don't know which is which. That's probably block 1, that's probably block 2 if it's numbered the same way as Chernobyl is. And you can see the distinctive chimneys. Each RBMK plant had its own architecturally distinct chimney style. Don't ask me why, it just does. It's a cool little RBMK thing. And there's your water outlets or uptakes, one or the other, for the cooling system. And there you've probably got cooling sprayers. So, like I said, turbine hall. The Golden Corridor, those of you who have seen Chernobyl know the Golden Corridor. Ignalina has one as well, though Ignalina's is not gold. I think it's like some different kind of metal cladding. That's that raised bit. It runs along that. And the control rooms are kind of offshoots from that. And then this is your power unit. You'll notice that blocks 1 and 2 at Ignalina are physically separated. At Chernobyl, blocks 1 and 2 are physically separated like this, and then blocks 3 and 4 are built back to back next to each other. So blocks 3 and 4 share a chimney at Chernobyl. Like I said, there's no containment vessels. These are essentially just warehouses. In fact, they're built like Soviet warehouses. They're pre-stressed concrete prefabs. That is a water sprayer, I was right. Go me. So they just, they essentially built a warehouse around it, because it's a big reactor, it's got a big refueling mechanism, and you want to be able to hot fuel it without shutting down the reactor. A, because it's more efficient power-wise. B, because it's breeding weapons materials. You don't want to have to shut down your fucking power infrastructure just to get plutonium out to send it to your weapons development labs. But yeah, that's Ignalina. So, this one had an accident in, I want to say, 70... Fuck, what was it, like 79, 78, 79, it had a pretty serious accident. And that's actually one of the accidents that was directly referenced in the investigation into what happened at Chernobyl. Now, actually, that's probably, if it's numbered the same way as Chernobyl, which is right to left, that's probably Unit 1, because this is the back of the plant. That's the front with the water, this is the back. RBMKs, aside from being huge, big reactors, they also tend to have huge, big complexes attached to them. There's a lot of reprocessing and research facilities attached. Reprocessing in particular, again, because it was breeding weapons-grade material. And then they had to process their own fuel as well from what they brought in. So, a lot of support infrastructure goes into a power plant this big. What do all the other small buildings do on the plant? What I was just talking about, mostly reprocessing uranium into fuel-grade stuff, reprocessing what comes out of the reactor into weapons-grade plutonium. Some of that was probably done on site, some of it would have been done at Mayak. Some of it would probably be just general chemical labs, because you're not just, you know, nuclear science isn't just a discipline of physics, it's a discipline of chemistry as well. There's a lot of metallurgy involved in it. So yeah, I'd say this is the water uptake, and then this would probably be the part of the cooling system. Or one's the... It might do both. I'm not sure how these structures actually work. Chernobyl has the same layout though. But those look like spray bars to me. So some power plants as a cooling system, they just have bars that run out and mist the water into the air. And that's what that looks like to me. I could be wrong, but that's what that looks like to me. Turbine buildings? No, the turbine hall is this long thing. Like, this whole long, low building is turbine hall. Because in RBMK plants, they're directly attached. You have a minimum amount of space between the reactors and the turbine hall. In fact, let me just... On either side of the reactor itself, you'll have condensers and drum separators, which are these slightly lower bits of the roof, because it sits to the side of the reactor. You can see a train there. That's actually a cask. That yellow thing is a cask for spent fuel. So the train lines run into the reactor chamber, and there's actually like a loading and unloading gantry for spent fuel casks and for new fuel rods. So you can basically run all the operations you need for the plant without shutting anything down. You just hot cell the place. So each of these two power blocks produces 1500 megawatts electrical energy. Probably double it and add some, so probably... no, sorry, triple it and add some. It's probably about 4,500, 5,000 watts... sorry, megawatts thermal, something like that. I mean, you guys can look it up, but it's about probably 4,500, 5,000 megawatts thermal energy for an RBMK 1500. RBMK 1000s, like Chernobyl has, are 3,300 megawatts thermal. So Soviet naming conventions named by the power output of the reactor, not by the thermal output. I think Western naming conventions usually go by thermal. Let's find out if the turbine hall roof is solid, and then we'll pop down south a bit and visit the more infamous sister. If you want to find other RBMK plants, I have custom scenery for this. Like, there is stuff here in the native sim, but I have custom scenery for this, for Chernobyl, for a bunch of other power plants. But there's also another RBMK plant in, well, near St. Petersburg. It's across the water from it, like across the bay. That was the Leningradskaya AES, Atomnoye Elektrostanция. That's the one that possibly gave my mum thyroid, spicy thyroid. Then there's another one at Smolensk, which I think is the biggest. It's either Smolensk or Kursk is the biggest of them. It's like 6 blocks in their 1500s from memory. So yeah, Smolensk, Kursk, Leningrad Oblast, or Leningradskaya Oblast, which is, St. Petersburg now, but the Oblast is still called Leningrad. And then Ignalina and Chernobyl, and I think that's all the RBMKs. I might be missing 1 or 2. It's a red and white chimney 4. That's, I think, just a general ventilation chimney from memory. I could be wrong though, because it's a nuclear reactor, right? It's not outputting smoke or anything, and you're not trying to vent steam. You're trying to recapture steam, if anything. So I'd say it's probably just general ventilation. Possibly some outtakes for the chemical laboratories as well, because there are chemical laboratories attached to the power blocks down the bottom. Kishtim opened again after its disaster in the 50s. Kishtim is Mayak. It's one of Mayak's many names. Mayak goes by a lot of names. Ozyorsk 30 is the city attached to Mayak. Kishtim is a generalized location used for Mayak to say where it is roughly without saying where it is. We could do a Mayak overflight today. You guys keen? We'll do Chernobyl, then we'll do Mayak, and then we'll do the rest of my itinerary I've got planned. This is going to be a super long stream, but whatever. I'm down for it. Got nothing better to do until this evening. I'm going to be playing squad with the gang. But yeah, Kishtim is Mayak, and Mayak is still, to my knowledge, the Russian Federation's main nuclear weapons production facility. It is to, or was to the Soviet Union, as Hanford was to the United States. Though the United States replaced Hanford and closed it, the Soviets and now the Russians continued using Mayak. Mayak was the site of so many fucking criticality excursions, it's not even funny. The concrete lake, that's Mayak. That's Lake Kiziltash from memory. If you fly over it in Flight Sim, it's not the one you think it is. There's a lake that looks like it's concreted over in Flight Sim, it's not that one. That's just sediment. It's quite hard to spot it, but yeah, Lake Kiziltash, it was putting shit tons of fucking radioisotopes into the, what's the name of the river, the Mecha, or something like that, the name of the river? Mecha, it's not Mechta, I think, it's like, Mecha or Mech, I think it's Mecha. The area around Mayak is very spicy. It's very interesting to fly over where the scenery actually works. Because it has so many militarily and industrial important cities, especially in Soviet times. So what is now Yekaterinburg, but was in Soviet times Sverdlovsk. Major shipbuilding plant. Because it lies along a river, right? And also they transport stuff overland. But Sverdlovsk, major fucking shipbuilding industry. There was a biological weapons plant, oh sorry, chemical weapons plant there. Because fucking anthrax is chemical, I always forget. That was the site of an anthrax leak in the 70s. And it was blamed on botulism in the meat, but it was actually an anthrax leak because somebody did a fucky-wucky when replacing the filters on the outtake chimneys. And there was like a ceramics factory across the road, and a shit ton of the workers there fell ill, and a bunch of them died. It's covered over, of course. So Sverdlovsk is up there. Fucking Chelyabinsk is southwest-ish of Mayak. Chelyabinsk is a major industrial center. A lot of tank production and repair plants, amongst other things. Fucking Karabakh is nearby. Karabakh is one of the more shitty, polluted towns in Russia. It's got a giant fucking smelter there. I think it's an aluminium smelter. There's a lot of shit. Because it's in the Urals, right? It's on the eastern flank of the Urals. There's a lot of shit there. And as a result, there's also a lot of military sites, like SAM sites, fucking ground-based stuff. It's pretty cool to fly over in the sim. In fact, Francis Gary Powers was shot down as he was passing over that general area. So he was probably specifically taking photos of Mayak when he got shot down. Autism, Rob. It's just autism. Also, as I always tell everyone, double check anything I tell you because my memory is not what it once was. So sometimes I do mix things up or get them wrong. This does have VRS, so we got to try and not enter it. I'm not sure what the max descent rate for this thing is. I'm going to probably say if we hold it above about 500 feet per minute, I'm assuming that would be. Oh, we should be okay. I was about to say speak the Queen's English, but it's the King's English now, I guess. Kazan, no. Kazan's further north. Kazan is on the Volga, not the Ural. Ural. Although, to be fair, I don't think most of those are on the Ural either. The Ural, I think, is like the southwest or something of the mountains. The river that runs through Chelyabinsk is the... fuck, starts with M. It's the... I'll think of it in a minute. Maybe I won't think of it in a minute. It starts with M, and it's super, super polluted. I know the name of it, it's just not coming to me at the moment. Do we have a collision model? We do not have a collision model. Okay, we'll land on the ground next to it. Actually, let's land over in that cute little courtyard it has. Over here. My immersion, yeah. It's kind of hit and miss whether scenery has collision geometry. A lot of custom scenery doesn't. Whereas a lot of the, like the auto-gen buildings, like these, some of them do, some of them don't. It's really annoying because sometimes you'll cut things a little close thinking, oh, that's probably not going to have collision geometry, and it does. And other times you'll try and land on something and just phase through it. How not to land a helicopter. When you get really high over your planned landing site like this with basically zero airspeed and just try and settle it, that's a great way to VRS yourself. That's why you normally come in with some speed and gradually slow down as you approach a landing site until you're basically in the hover already over it at low altitude. Which is what I need to start teaching myself to do, especially in DCS. So when you're coming in with a fully loaded Mi-8 and you do this shit, it's a good way to kill yourself. So we'll go away, we'll gather some speed, and we'll come back around and do a bit more of a proper landing. Yeah, Mias, that's it. I was about to say, can someone look it up, because it's bugging me now. I knew what it was, but it just... I've been having a lot of trouble with names lately. Like, I'm starting to worry, like... This is... I have trouble with people's names at the best of times, but I usually don't have trouble with place names. There's no real history of Alzheimer's in my family, but it do be kind of concerning. Does the dance if you descend vertically? Oh, yes. The skeleton dance. But yeah, Kazan is north along the Volga. It's like east of Moscow. Where you don't remember every river in Russia? Yeah. I mean, the Mias is a pretty major river. If I forgot the 3 major Siberian rivers, it'd be time to just... Oh, we got a little close there. It'd be time to call up the fucking nursing home and reserve a place, I think. That's me being slow on the pedals. This is me being a drunk. I'm not leading enough with the anti-torque when I come off the collective. We're probably running into some loss of tail rotor effectiveness too, although I forget how the mechanics of that work. Rotary wing aviation is still a bizarre mystery to me. Oh no, I fucking... Jesus, the gauges are... Yeah. I think the gauges might be slightly bugged. Because there's no way we're pulling that much power right now, surely. It's going to be a hard landing, but I'll take it. Like, I've got the collective dropped all the way down, and look at it. This thing should have an automatic governor unless it's broken somehow. That's the rotor brake, which shouldn't be on. I don't know. Curious. I'll have to figure it out. Maybe they changed something or added something. I just haven't flown it since. But anyway, we're not going to shut it down. We'll just go straight to our next flight. Let's see. Mississippi, Missouri, Delaware, Charles, Colorado. Columbia goes through the US, doesn't it? Like its southern reaches. Snake feeds into the Columbia from memory. Rio Grande's on the border, isn't it? I can name a few. Just a few. Is it the hot start that screwed it? Maybe, I don't know. It could be. Some aircraft are like that, but I don't think it did last time I flew it. But it has been a while. So we want to go south. Like I said, Ukraine's pretty cloudy at the moment. This is live weather. Rasorka is going to be an interesting stop on our journey, but we won't spawn there because we want to spawn somewhere. This is inside the zone, I think, but not like inside. Actually, you know what? It's probably just on the outside because I think this is the edge of it here. The wind was blowing northeast when the accident happened, so the zone doesn't extend very far south of Chernobyl or very far west. It extends mostly to the northeast. All through here, there's Chernihiv. And then Slavutich, which was the new city built to replace Pripyat after the accident, is like over here somewhere. It's like, I think that's it there. Yeah, that's it there. That's Slavutich. You have to actually go through part of Belarus to get to Slavutich from Pripyat because the border cuts down into this area of the swamp here. It's one of the largest wetlands in Europe. Huge swamp. The Pripyat marshes, which is all through here, Mazir, all this area. This was a pretty spicy place to be in World War II. Like, proper survival horror shit. This is deepest, darkest backwoods, where everyone speaks this bizarre mix of Polish, Ukrainian, Russian, Belarusian, that, like, you can't understand if you speak any of those languages. It's quite an interesting area. Real fucking deep backwoods country. Why did they build a reactor here? It's on a river. Plentiful water. It's kind of backwoods, so it and the giant over-the-horizon radar are not going to be snooped on too much by civilians. Or foreign tourists, and it's close to a major city, as well as close to an over-the-horizon radar, which is the reason the power plant was built here, specifically. Numbered rivers in a province here? How creative. I mean, that's not the worst idea, honestly. So let's fly from here. We'll give it a little extra fuel. We're probably not going to need that much. It's got good endurance, but we'll give it a little extra. Let's go. Hudson. Oh yeah, the Hudson flows past New York City. How could I forget? Baltimore, I think that Baltimore's built on the Baltimore River or something like that. Yeah. A lot of the rivers in the US are named after the major cities that lie on, or like the major cities are named after the river they lie on or run close to. Could take a trip in Misfits sometime and land in the Hudson like Sully. I did, but in a flying boat, so it probably doesn't really count. But yes, we flew down the Hudson from some bush-ass strip out in the middle of upstate New York to down the Hudson to New York City, and then from New York City to Long Island, and then all the way up Long Island to Montauk to see the radar. Chattahoochee. Oh, all the southern rivers have really interesting names. So I guess they pulled them from the local First Nations languages, right? Like they do here with a lot of stuff, and like they do in Canada with a lot of stuff. Always gives you some interesting names. Okay, battery, beacon light, nav light. We won't bother with the landing light. It's daytime, and it's quite bright now compared to the last flight. Fuel pump can go on. Those are on by default. Good, we'll leave them on. That's part of the music, not the starting process. We'll pull the doors off for this one, so we can stick our head out. I mean, we could anyway, but we'll pull the doors off, my immersions. Dash lights can stay... Oh, they can go on, okay. Yeah, red strip means that it's off. I see. So this can go on. Dome light we don't need. It's bright enough. Transponder will turn on once the engine's spooled up. And then to get this thing started... Is the rotor brake off? I think it's off. I think forwards is off. I'm not sure. Does anyone remember? I think it's forwards is off. We'll find out soon enough. Start button is the thumb button on the cyclic, which is kind of weird to me. It's on its now fusible link. Yes. Oh, if we break it, we can just restart the helicopter, right? It'll be fine. This thing does have a little EFB as well, which I always forget about because I don't really use it. But it's just a Garmin unit. It doesn't have any extra options as far as I'm aware. So I just leave it turned off because I don't need no GPS. Okay, that's probably not the rotor brake then. How many hours we got in this thing? 5.5 hours, just about. Not bad. Should have more than that, though, because this thing's so fucking fun. I don't think this has a distinct throttle. That's the governor. That's what I want. I think? Maybe that was off last time. I don't know. Anyway, that should get the helicopter running up to speed. You'll notice it has a little hover indicator, kind of like the DIS hover indicator in the Mi 8 and the Mi 24. It's quite neat. It's very useful for when you're hovering, because if you're looking outside, especially in the sim where you don't have the actual real-life haptic feedback and sense of depth perception, I find I tend to rock back and forth like a pendulum, or side to side when I'm trying to hover. So if I just stare at that and ignore what I'm seeing outside, it helps me a lot. You know what? I wonder if we were flying with the... We were. The governor's... It was off on the hot start and we didn't turn it on because that blue light wasn't on. Oops! Oops! That would explain a few things. Hey, the helicopter flew remarkably well for not having the fucking governor on. So I guess that's my cue to ask got friends if they can add some damage for monkeys like me fucking up the helicopter. We're going to give it a little bit of left and back trim to start with. We're going to put the alternator on now because we got power. We're going to go on with the little Garmin transponder. Okay. Not that it really matters, I just do it for the sake of. It does have a pilot body, I think, from memory. I forget how to turn it on. It's like a switch somewhere. And I forget what that does. That does something, I just don't remember what. Oh, let's do an external as well for those who haven't seen this cute little thing yet. Like I said, it's basically just a miniaturized single-seat MD-500. Very small, as you can see, because the Misfits pilots are only about 5'6" or 5'7" tall. Both the male and female Misfits pilots, they're quite short. I say with my average height privilege. But yeah, like you can see and the model's actually synced, so you can see me moving the controls, which is pretty neat. No, I think it put some cosmetic element on the helicopter or something. Oh, no, I know what it was. I think that's for the night vision in the version that has it. There's a military version which has like little dummy miniguns on it and tip lights on the rotor, and I think that on that version controls the night vision. It's not like super realistic night vision, it's just a toy, you know, to play with, but if it's not pretending to be super realistic night vision, I'm not going to criticize it for not being super realistic night vision. Okay. Oh, it's left pedal maybe. Yeah, left pedal, I guess. Just a little bit. There we go, we're in a kind of stable hover. And we want to head northeast-ish? Northeast? This is an add-on, Rob. It's like $15. Less if you catch it on a sale. It's from GotFriends. So if you go to the GotFriends website, it's like got-friends.com or something. I fucking forget, honestly. But anyway, if you find it, it's very much worth getting. I recommend this to everyone. Like, even if you're not super into helicopters, excuse me while I trim this out, even if you're not super into helicopters, it's easy to fly, it's quick to pick up, it doesn't take long to start or shut down. Like, it's just good, simple fun to fly. And it's got a really good flight model. And it sounds good and it looks good, so, you know, that always helps. So there's a lot of these little villages and sort of farming towns around the southern edge of the zone. It's pretty good farming country here. In fact, this part of Ukraine looks very much like central Alberta. Southern Ukraine looks like southern Alberta. And northern Ukraine looks like northern Alberta. It's no wonder there's so many Ukrainians in Alberta, because it's basically the same as home to them. Like the school my dad went to before he, you know, started going to high school in Edmonton, his little school in fucking Thorsby, they taught in Ukrainian, English, and German. But you can't fly this thing AFU style? I bet you I can't. Yeah, you're right. It's a wonder I can fly this thing at all, given how I am with helicopters. If anyone has Sevakogo on speed dial, by the way, and if he's even still awake, it's pretty late in Germany, give him a bell and tell him that we're doing the Chernobyl flight, because I know he's pretty keen to catch me doing this. The VOD will always be there if it's, well, you know, if he misses it, but it's always more fun to catch a stream live. A little bit out of trim, as usual. So we're going to have a reasonable flight time, just because, first of all, this thing ain't super fast. I'm not really giving it welly either. I'm just cruising along. So this thing ain't super fast. We've got a reasonable amount of distance to cover. I think I already see the new safe confinement. Actually, no, that'll be the radar. That's what that is. That's basically north of us. That's a radar. So the power plant will be just beyond the trees in that direction. Yeah, one of the regulars wanted to do another flight over Chernobyl, because I've done it before on stream, like twice, I think. But it was a long time ago, so he wanted to see it again. And we're doing it in a helicopter this time, not fixed wing, so we can get close to the ground and hover around instead of circling over one building for 10 minutes while I try and explain the history of it. How have you been, man? It's been a while. We'll probably hit Rasoka first, because it's closest to us, and just judging by where we are compared to the radar, it should be pretty much off the nose somewhere. It's a little difficult to spot, to be honest. You'd think it'd be easy. Rasoka is one of the vehicle graveyards. I think it'd be easy because there's so many brightly coloured fire trucks and shit down there, but it's genuinely hard to spot it, because there's just so many trees here. Working mostly, just got back from visiting family for Easter. Nice. Yeah, I'm good. I've got family visiting from Canada at the moment, so spent a few days with them. They are down in Melbourne at the moment, I think. They've gone down to Melbourne. Then they're flying from there to Adelaide, and then... Or, no, from there to Tasmania. My parents are going to meet them in Tasmania, so my parents are going to Tasmania, which is pretty cool. I've never been, but they're going. And then my parents are going to come back after a couple days, and my aunt and uncle are going to continue on to Adelaide. Then I think they're going to like Alice Springs or Darwin or something. They're going all over the country, but they'll be back later in the month, and we'll spend some more time together before they head home. So it's been pretty cool. Busy, but the good kind of busy. Weather's a bit shit today. I mean, it looks cool, but like it's not really ideal. At least the wind's calm. This thing gets knocked around pretty badly in the wind, as you might imagine, being so small and lightweight. We've got a small river here. I think, those of you who watch Shy on YouTube, Lithuanian Urbex guy, I think this is the river that him and Anton and Old Mate crossed when they did their visit to the zone. It's pretty much on the... It's like a kilometre or two inside the southern edge of the zone from memory. And Rasoka is just past it from memory. On the far bank somewhere. Rasoka actually has a very small airstrip attached to it. I'm not sure if it'll show up on the map, and I kind of don't want to cheat using the map, but it's there if we need it. One thing I will say is I wonder if that's it there. It's in a clearing, so I'm just looking for a clearing big enough. From memory, the reason I had trouble finding it the first time I flew over it is because the LODs for the vehicles don't pop in until you're super close. I think. So we'll see if we can test that theory. The one rule of visiting the zone, don't fucking disturb anything. I can't believe that, I mean... Somebody brought this up, and it kind of makes sense when you think about it. Like, a lot of the conscripts involved, and even a lot of the NCOs and some of the officers involved, wouldn't even remember that it happened. Like, they wouldn't know it happened, basically, except some vague fucking reference to it. It's kind of like when you think about a lot of the troops who were on the final rotations in Iraq and Afghanistan weren't even alive when 9/11 happened. Just existential crisis nightmare fuel. But still, like, there's enough warning signs. Like, what the fuck, man? Okay, I think we're barking up the wrong tree here. It's further in. I think. That looks like it's a burial site. So a lot of villages, like a lot of old villages, were just bulldozed and buried to stop people from moving back into them. A lot of people did move back into the zone anyway, especially on the Belarus side. Kopachi, which is a small village a little further southeast along the Pripyat River, from memory. I think it's southeast. It was partially buried. Its location in some of the Stalker games. As we get closer, and particularly around the plant, you'll see that Stalker Cooler Pripyat in particular directly models various in-game locations off their real-life counterparts, although usually moves their locations for gameplay purposes. The original, like Stalker Shadow of Chernobyl and Stalker Clear Sky, rearranged the geography of the area to make it a straight south to north progression as you got deeper into the zone with the power plant at the end. Actually, the power plant is to the southeast of Pripyat. Yanos Station is to the west. So, Call of Pripyat reorganizes things to be more geographically accurate to real life, but it still moves some buildings. Like the concrete plant near Jupiter and Jupiter itself are a lot closer to the... Well, the concrete plant's inside the power plant, because it was used during the construction and during the cleanup. And the Jupiter plant is actually on the outskirts of Pripyat, on the western outskirts. Because that was one of the other major industries in the area. Obviously, the city existed because of the power plant, but it was also then opportune to put a large robotics and electronics factory co-located with it. And then, of course, you've got the radar. So it's a typical Soviet thing of, you know, where you've got the resources, you build stuff. And you use local resources as much as possible. We might need to use the cheetah map here, just because I've got myself a bit turned around. We should have probably gone past it by now. You can actually see the power plant now in parts of Pripyat. It's the cooling towers for blocks 5 and 6, not completed. That's... Something dragged my view. That's the eastern end of the complex, and then that's the new safe confinement. Then that's the Duga radar right there. Oh, this might be... That looks like it could be an airstrip. This should be a Rasoka, maybe. Just check the map, because I remember when I was buzzing around looking for it last time, it took me forever to find it. It's deceptively difficult to spot. We've gone past it. It was further west. UKXX, Rasoka. So we'll head southwest, and then we'll come back up this way. It's going to slow down our journey a bit, but that's alright. We're on the scenic tour after all. Training booklet says you need to be dug in when stopped, and by God, the conscripts will follow it, because the CO doesn't even want a hint of trouble from above. Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of a universal thing. Honestly, we not to the same extent, especially because I never deployed anywhere, as, you know, I never went anywhere or did anything, but in any army, you get told to do something, or the manual says do something, you do it. You think about it later, when somebody actually stirs shit over it. Still though, we actually had a kata combined arms training exercise. I think the entire battalion went down Holsworthy. I wasn't there for this one because it was after I'd done my knee and I was still kind of immobile for the most part. But there was a battalion kata down at Holsworthy. It was in the middle of summer. Holsworthy in the middle of summer is usually like 40 plus degrees Celsius, usually around 44, 45 in the shade. Someone got hypothermia. I'm not joking. Someone got fucking hypothermia doing a river crossing out at Holsworthy in the middle of fucking summer during a battalion kata. Apparently somebody nearly got demoted over it. I don't know the full story, I just know that it happened and everyone was just as incredulous as I was. But, militarythings.txt. So the first little stop we're going to have here is the Rasoka vehicle graveyard. Why is it called a vehicle graveyard? Well, because a lot of the vehicles used during the cleanup was so contaminated, or potentially contaminated, that it wouldn't have been worth the time or effort or manpower to decontaminate all of them, and some of them were so contaminated that they actually got activated. Contamination and activation are two different things. Contamination is when you're carrying radioisotope particles. So, you know, you might have radioactive dust, or somehow a particle is attached to something that is then attached to you. Usually means you're tracking dust. Or fuel fleas, which are little bits of fuel material just free living in the world after the plant exploded. That's contamination. Activation is the real fun shit that happens when something is contaminated badly enough or for long enough that it actually becomes radioactive itself. Like, it actually becomes a radioactive emitter itself because it becomes unstable. It tends to happen with various metals when exposed to high amounts of radiation for long periods. Activation is bad no-no. Once something becomes activated, like, you can't deco it. You can decontaminate something by washing it down with soapy water and scrubbing it. That's your decontamination done. But once it's activated, good luck. You basically just have to wait for it to spit out all its fun particles, or just bury it. So the vehicle graveyards were used to dispose of vehicles that were either activated themselves or just so contaminated that it wasn't worth the effort of decoing them. Fire trucks, bulldozers, mobile cranes, other construction vehicles, BTRs, BRDMs, BMPs, they were all used during the cleanup effort because the military came in, like the chemical engineering troops came in, the guys that are usually responsible for either deploying or cleaning up after chemical, biological, radiological weapons, or nuclear weapons they clean up after, they don't deploy. So a lot of both civilian and military equipment. Helicopters. Quite a few helicopters. There it is. That's it there. Oh, my labels are still on. I think I'm on US West if you guys want to fly along, by the way. Closest airfield, if you don't have the Rasoka scenery, is Dimir, which is to the south. Then, if you do have the scenery, just load in at Rasoka. This is the airfield there. I think the airstrip was built after the disaster as, like, a way to get in and out of the place, but I could be wrong on that. Either way, it's, I'd say it's pretty disused now. Didn't try to locate it, but you know where the Red Forest is? Roughly, yes. It's south of the power plant, across the bridge. And it's called the Red Forest because the trees died because they were exposed to so much radiation. That cutting there is either a border strip for the zone or it's a power line concession. I'd say it's probably a power line concession. They're the quickest way to navigate to the power plant, because where are the power lines going to come from? But they're also the easiest way to get caught coming into or out of the zone is following those. Even more easy than following the roads, because the line of sight down them is so long. So we got a bit of everything here. Those of you who've played Stalker, and in particular played some of the mods that add cut content back in, you may recognize this. This was reproduced almost exactly in Stalker, but cut from the game. So if you play Anomaly, it was added back in with the Anomaly mod and a few others. The big helicopters down there are Mi-6s, the predecessor of the Mi-26. Then we got a couple of Hinds. Hinds were used for radiological reconnaissance. If you're wondering why there would be an attack helicopter in this area, the Hind had a subvariant which was specialized to radiological reconnaissance, so that in the event of a war in Europe going nuclear, the Soviets would have an armed and armored and fast scout helicopter to scoot ahead of the main forces and figure out where the hotspots were. Fire truck down there. Some backhoes. Trying to remember what they're called there. My English failed me. Trucks of every variety. Zills, Kamazes, Krazes, there's buses, there's cars, everything. Urals. Might set us down in a clearing next to one of the Mi-6s so you can see just how big those helicopters are. Fucking monstrous, huge things. Isn't the OG? Yes, it is. It has an internal overpressure and a hermetically sealed cabin. And it also, by the front seater's right shoulder, if you turn around, there's a black box with a gauge on it that says R/H, Roentgens per hour. It actually has basic detection equipment itself, but the specialized radiological reconnaissance version, try saying that 3 times in a hurry, has much more advanced, much more sensitive equipment on board that takes up most of the troop bay. The Mi-6s, yes, they were dumping dolomite onto the reactor, so were Mi-8s. Mi-8s were doing quite a lot of work as well. In fact, there's the famous video of a Mi-8 getting tangled up in a crane cable and crashing into the plant. Unfortunately, I think the entire crew died from that because it was a bit of a, pretty high off the ground when it went down. So if exposure to an open reactor core wasn't bad enough, they had to watch out for fucking guy wires and chimneys and things. Very dangerous job. This, whatever you want to say about the bureaucrats that were involved, or the flaws of the RBMK, or what the Kurchatov Institute should have told the operator, whatever. The Soviet Army and the Soviet Air Force fucking acquitted themselves excellently during the cleanup. And that was one area that the HBO miniseries, I think, didn't try and make any shitty political point scoring, was the portrayal of the Soviet military. They made a bunch of shitty point scoring, changes to the actual history in a bunch of other places, but the Soviet military got the recognition they deserved. One of the ones I bring up the most is the Minister for Coal Production. Remember how in the series he's shown as this weedy pencil neck in a poorly fitting three-piece suit that's intimidated by the big burly bear miners? Well, if you look at photos of the actual guy, he was a big burly bear miner himself. He'd been working in the mine since he was a fucking teenager. He was a hero of socialist labour. He was a god to miners because he spent his career designing equipment to make mining safer and more efficient for the workers. Like, he was the absolute opposite of what they portrayed him as in that series. Kind of did with the whole animal killing section. Yeah, they kind of did, I guess. But that was like the one thing. The actual, the main sort of professional units of the army, so to speak, during the cleanup were shown in a pretty good light, I think. Tarakanov especially. General Tarakanov was really well portrayed. And Tarakanov was also involved in the 1988 Lenina earthquake cleanup in Armenia. And he said it was worse than Chernobyl. And if you think about it, yeah, Chernobyl was fighting an invisible enemy that killed some people in a horrible way, but most people just, it didn't affect them till later in life. The 88 quake, they were dragging whole families out of collapsed buildings. It was horrific. That disaster, the earthquake, was so bad that the Soviet Union officially requested United States help, like, immediately. They actually got it too, I think. Those look like stretched Hueys. What's going on there? This is freeware scenery, so it's not going to be wholly accurate. We've got some trucks there with what appear to be AK-630s on the back of them. I'm not sure those were present in Chernobyl. Some BMP-3s, I don't think those are present either. But, it is what it is. It's mostly accurate. They've taken a few minor liberties, perhaps. A couple Mi-8 Hulks. Oh, it was bad. It was one of the, there were a great many contributing factors to the collapse of the Soviet Union. A lot of them were baked into the fabric of Soviet society themselves. But the kind of concentrated blows of just the constant ball drain of the Afghan war, the disaster and cleanup at Chernobyl, and then the disaster at Lenina, combined with that was like that earthquake happened right around the time that ethnic strife between the Armenians and the Azeris was hitting a boiling point. It was not good. The sequence of events that led to the collapse of the Soviet Union was kind of hellish for anyone that had to live through it. If you're trying to explain to somebody who doesn't really have a point of reference what it was like, or what it's like to exist in the former Soviet Union, especially for like rural Russians or even rural Ukrainians outside of the major cities, and most of Central Asia, imagine the sci-fi trope of like a civilization growing up in the ruins of a great race of ancients that like had interstellar travel and all this shit. Now imagine that, except that society that you grew up in the ruins of existed within living memory. Your parents remember it. You may have even been born in it, and remember a couple of years worth of it. That's the reality that a lot of people are living. So whenever you kind of look at the weird schizo-politics of Eastern Europe, bear that in mind. The West has, to my knowledge, not experienced anything even comparable for a great many generations. It's probably heading for it, though. Probably heading for it quite soon, I would say. Oh. So the textures and models aren't the greatest, but they're not bad. I mean, it's Misfit scenery. You're not usually going to be landing here. You're going to be flying over it, but you can see, comparing to the Hinds, just how huge these Mi-6s are. We'll get a little bit of a hover taxi happening, and we'll get closer to one. They're quite commonly seen as, like, their wreckage is quite commonly seen as scenery objects in the Stalker games as well. I'm just wary of brushing up against something with the rotor disc or a skid, because I do have collisions turned on. Like, look how big that thing is. Huge helicopters. Okay, so that's Rasovka. Let's get ourselves back in the air and continue on. Again, ideally without hitting anything. Watch out for his rotors. Big, big rotors on that thing. Our next landmark is fucking obvious. You can see it from here. It's the Duga over the Horizon radar system. Built in the late 60s to serve as an early warning post for incoming ballistic missile launches from primarily the US, but NATO in general. It was the main power consumer at Chernobyl. It was the reason the plant was built where it was, because they needed not just power for Kiev as it grew, but power for that thing. Don't ask me what the power output, like peak power output of the radar is. I do not remember. I only remember that it was a fuck ton. And in fact, the radar earned its nickname the Russian Woodpecker because it was so powerful that when broadcasting, it would interfere with television and radio signals in North America. You get this tap, 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 tap interference in your signal coming from this guy. The amount of floor space needed for the computers that powered it, that did all the, you know, the contact processing and everything, is phenomenal. It was like a 2 or 3 story building, just full of these massive cabinets. BioNerd 23, fuck me, phone, hang on, sorry guys. I love it when I'm actually expecting important phone calls for once, and I just get scammers instead. Scammers and fucking Telstra telemarketers, fuck's sake. Anyway, BioNerd23 on her YouTube channel has a video exploring the inside of the main building for the Duga complex, and she also has, I think, a video of her climbing the antenna. It's quite something. Quite something. I did unmute myself, didn't I? Yes, I did. Good. Is it bigger than the Chinook? The Mi-6? Much bigger. Much, much bigger. Like, holy shit. It makes the Chinook look like a toy. The Mi-26 is bigger than the Mi-6, but not by as much as you might expect. And the Mi-26 is hands down the largest helicopter on Earth that actually entered service. I think the V-12 was slightly larger, but the V-12 also has a weird layout. Number stations? Oh yes. Those are always fun. That one comes from, the Lincolnshire Poacher comes from Akrotiri, I think. Should fly out of Akrotiri sometime in a sim. Not today, but maybe sometime. So this is well and truly exclusion zone now. this area it's part of the Pripyat Marshes. It's like a massive wetland. I think it's the largest wetland in Central Europe. So it's going to naturally be very woody, but also the fact that it's mostly undisturbed by humans for, going on fucking 40 years now. Nature's just reclaiming everything. Even in the city of Pripyat itself, nature is reclaiming everything. If you want to see the city, you go in winter, because otherwise you can't see anything for all the leaves on the trees. There's just poplars everywhere. It's quite beautiful. I really want to see it. I doubt there's going to be any hope of that now, seeing it in person, but I would love to see it sometime before it's completely gone and before I'm completely gone. Give a brief overview of the importance of Akrotiri. What's its historical significance? It's a British air base that is basically counted as sovereign British soil in the Mediterranean. It's a staging post for any British operations in the Med and the Levant. The US uses it for the same purpose. It's one of the few remaining sort of colonial outposts, if you will, that the Brits have. As such, it serves as a rebroadcast post for a lot of interesting radio signals, shall we say, and a lot of intelligence goes on around there. On the southern coast of Cyprus. So it's also in a spicy area because of the the whole 1974 invasion thing, and Cyprus being divided in half with a DMZ. So Akrotiri also serves as a convenient staging point for peacekeeping operations, but its main significance is not quite so much to do with peacekeeping, put it that way. Starting to get a little bit of turbulence. Not too bad, but just a little bit. Probably a little bit of wind picking up off the trees and throwing us around. A little bit of thermals as well, I'd imagine, as the ground heats up. I think we set the time to what, like mid-morning, late morning? So yeah, the ground will be warming up a little. Interestingly, Mizfirs only has like 4 or 5 varieties of tree that it generates. In real life, this is mostly poplars, as far as I'm aware. Poplars and things like that. Trees that like water. Now, having said that Mizfirs only has a couple species of tree, morphologically speaking, the colours generate on the trees based on the terrain textures beneath them, so you'll notice they do blend in with the terrain. That's not because it's the right species of tree necessarily, it's because the trees take their colour from the ground underneath. So you will see things like purple or red trees in some cases. It's pretty rare, but you'll also see trees generating spontaneously out of green surfaces, like, say, some tennis courts, some sporting fields, large merchant ships with green anti-fouling paint on the deck. You'll see trees growing out of those in the sim. It's pretty funny. Pretty good. So, we are kind of like southwest of the power plant. The actual city of, or town of Chernobyl is that direction. It's a bit southeast of the plant, and is used as the main base and main residential area for staff that are posted to work in the zone. Pripyat is both too decrepit and a little too spicy. Pripyat itself is not maintained at all, except for a handful of places, and so it's slowly crumbling. Some of the buildings are starting to collapse. The high school, I think, was one of the first to collapse. Those of you who played Call of Pripyat, the high school where you meet back up with Zulu, that it's exactly in as bad a shape in real life as it is in the game. Just in the game they added some anomalies for flavor. When the Soviets built a city, they tried to use locally sourced materials. River sand, kinda dookie for concrete. Kinda dookie, especially this river sand. So it's not the best. Sea sand is what you want for concrete because it's more roughly abraded, whereas river sand tends to be quite smooth. Doesn't adhere as well. That and the ground's wet, it shifts, it's like it's still in an area that gets cold enough for freeze-thaw cycles. The weather is not good for these buildings. It's actually interesting if you compare buildings in Pripyat that didn't have their windows broken versus buildings that did. The ones that did are just complete ruins now, like internally, and the ones that didn't are largely intact. The fucking Lazurny swimming pool was actually used until the 1990s, the late 1990s, by staff in the zone. They continued using the swimming pool. It's on the west side of town. We'll actually pass it as we're flying around the town. They continued using that for over a decade, and it was more or less intact until they stopped using it in the 90s. Someone broke a window, and now it looks like it was abandoned when the rest of the city was. Nature do be kind of scary like that. So these are all autogen buildings on the nose, including, that should be the main building there, which is like a 2 or 3 story complex full of computers. It's massive in real life. These are all like barracks buildings, security buildings, ancillary equipment, messes, things like that. But the antenna is as it should be. This is the receiver antenna from memory. The transmitter is over by Chernihiv, about 50 kilometers that way. The main array is, I think, 205 meters tall or something like that. It's over 200 meters tall. The secondary array is 100 and something, like 170, 180 meters tall, I think. Actually, it's probably slightly less, because it's just over half the height of the main array, so over 100, and then the main array's over 200. Now, the model here isn't the most detailed, but if I can get close enough, the actual antenna itself, this is just scaffolding. The antenna itself are the wires strung on the back of it. The reflector is the wires strung across the back of it. And you see, I'll have to get in front of it to hover next to one, but there's these weird cone-shaped things that kind of interleave back and forth. Those are shared with the Krug antennas. There's a Krug antenna somewhere around here, but I don't think it's in the sim. Like, even the custom scenery I don't think has it. Those of you who played Stalker will know the name Krug from Call of Pripyat. It's in Zaton. Well, in real life, it's pretty much next to this thing, like a couple hundred meters away here. And the Krug antenna uses the same elements that this does. I forget what their specific purpose was, though. I'm not radar-brained enough to know, but it was something important. But it's very much like the British chain home radar, the first operational early warning radar, in that it's a massive scaffold, and the wires themselves are the reflector, not any solid piece. I think the cone-shaped things are the receivers themselves from memory, but I could be wrong on that. What does it take to heat up my chicken sandwiches, Array? Not very long, I'd imagine, if you turn it on. Biconical dipoles. A lot of my uni courses based around comms radar tech. Oh, nice! Awesome. Another radar knower, because I am very much a Philistine when it comes to radar stuff. I know a little, but nowhere near as much as I'd like, so the more people whose brains I can pick, the better. But you can see them there. Yeah, biconical dipoles. And they're kind of interleaved with each other all the way up the antenna. You can't see the wires for the reflector in this, because they're just not modeled, but in real life they would be stretching between those scaffolds on the other side, on the back side of the radar. So the Krug is somewhere around here, but without actual scenery, it's going to be super difficult to spot. In fact, I'm not sure if we'll be able to. It's also pretty much overgrown at this point. I just want to say that might be it there, but like I said, there's no scenery, so it'll just be a blurry texture on the ground. There's not much point looking. No, I don't, sadly. It's starting to get a little scratchy. I think what I'll do is I'll head to Chernobyl, as in the city, town, whatever. I'll quickly land there, grab myself another drink, and then we'll keep going. I just don't want to blown my voice out, considering I've had a sore throat all week. That's the power plant there, obviously, we'll come back to it, and Pripyat is just on the other side. You can see some of the taller buildings jutting up from the trees up there. Like I said, when the accident happened, the prevailing wind was from the southwest, so it was blowing it northeast into Belarus and Russia. So Pripyat, being basically directly north of the power plant, north/northwest, was right in the line of fire, so to speak. Whereas Chernobyl is not, because it was on the other side of it, down here in front of us. Soviets ever thought about using computer cooling water as central heating? They did have central heating, but it was usually generated by power plants, not by the cooling water from computers. A lot of the power plants in the former Soviet Union are like dual purpose. They generate heat and electricity. I mean, you've got to generate heat to generate electricity anyway, because turbines, right? But you know what I mean. They generate excess heat. This big loop of water is the cooling pond, by the way. So it's got this kind of spit that comes down to here and separates it from the river, so that the water isn't mixing with the river water before it cools off sufficiently, because that would cause an ecological no-no. You'd end up with fucking blue-green algae all the way from here to fucking... all the way from here to Poland, basically. Or all the way from here to Kiev, I guess, the other way, downstream. So they separate the cooling water from the river water until it's sufficiently cooled down that it's not going to cause serious problems. Mixes back in with the river. In fact, you know what? No. It has to go down here and then back out the other side, I think. And the river runs parallel, because you can see there's a bit of land separating the river there. And then that's the river running down past Chernobyl, which is there, I think. It's a little hard to see because of the trees, but that looks like it there. That village I was talking about, Kapachi, is like there somewhere, I think. It's just north of Chernobyl. And it was bulldozed and buried. We're very close to the Belarus border at the moment because, like I said, the Belarus border has that like little penis that dangles down between Chernobyl and Slavutich. So a lot of that sort of marshland you see on the other side of the river, that's like just sort of right around where the border is. Maybe a kilometer or two further northeast. This looks like an old factory of some sort, but I'm not entirely sure what it is, or what they produced here. However, what I will say is it looks very much like it might have inspired the factory for Yantar. Stalker players, what do we think? Is that Yantar? I reckon it is. Looks like it. Like I said, Stalker chops and changes the geographical locations, but a lot of the complexes in the game are directly based on real places. They just move them for gameplay reasons. You can also see a lot of dredged up sand around here. As I said, they use local materials as much as possible when building cities. So a lot of the sand was locally dredged out of the river or out of the swamp and came from when they were building the cooling pond as well. The Skadovsk, another thing Stalker players will recognize, is around here somewhere. The wreck of the Skadovsk and the, it's not a houseboat, but like the riverboat. There's like a function center or something, a floating function center. That and the Skadovsk are pretty close to each other. The water masks aren't perfect here. Mizfiz water masks tend to shit the bed when it comes to swamps and wetlands, but you know, you can see where the water is. Or where it should be, rather. got that fun misfizz issue where traffic dries under the bridge, not over it. I wonder if they'll ever fix that. Who knows? That, I wouldn't say that almost looks like a lumber yard or something. Brick factory, maybe. There's power lines on the other side of town. We want to watch out for those. Anyway, this is Chernobyl. I don't remember. I think the custom scenery adds a couple of real-life buildings. There's, like, a lot of the buildings here have beautiful frescoes and murals on them. You know, like, socialist, realist-style, religious iconography devoted to the god of science, basically. But I don't remember if any of that's represented in the sim. Because I don't remember if the custom scenery really extends this far south beyond maybe one or two separate buildings. Chernobyl, by the way, it's more or less, if you want to translate it, translates to wormwood. So there's all sorts of bizarre schizo conspiracy theories about some fucking tract of the Bible about the end times and wormwood and shit, and people going, oh my god, Chernobyl means wormwood. Is like, whatever, dude. Yeah, I don't think we have any real custom buildings here, which is a shame, because some of them are quite beautiful. Let's try and find a nice landing spot, and then I will grab myself a drink. Shouldn't be too long, just a couple minutes. And we'll continue on to the north. Wormwood a key ingredient in absinthe? Yes, yes it is. The Green Fairy and her slightly more malevolent cousin, the Blue Fairy, over there. Remember, kids, if you ever see something glowing visibly blue in open air, or in water especially, and it doesn't have any power cables running to it, no batteries, and it's not bioluminescent, don't go near it. Anything you see glowing blue is not your friend. Jeez, it's like that, is it? Yeah, blue glow is either Cherenkov radiation, especially in water, like in spent fuel pools, you see that a lot. Certain elements as well, you'll see that in air, I think. Usually it's in water, because what Cherenkov radiation is it's electrons being accelerated beyond the speed of light in a particular medium. It's basically a visual sonic boom, if that makes any sense. Except for the speed of light. So, that's Cherenkov radiation. But then there's a separate glowing blue effect, which is what actually happened with the reactor core exposed to the air. That wasn't Cherenkov. This was ionizing the air directly. When you ionize the air, it gives off a sort of blue-violet glow. So if you see a column of blue light just venting up into the fucking clouds and it appears to go on forever, do not go anywhere near it. Holy shit. That is like the baddest of bad no-nos. That little, like, corner there, the grass looks nice to land on. I think we'll land there. As usual, I have not lost enough height before getting to my planned landing site, so it's going to be very clumsy, and we may risk VRS. We'll extend out a bit and come back, so we can bleed some speed and altitude first. So you want to watch the HBO series? I kind of do want to watch it again. It was, like, despite my criticisms of it taking political liberties, so to speak, to score points against a dead system, well, a dead country, because the system is very much not dead, and it's starting to scare people because it's gaining ground again. I'm not talking about modern Russia either. But yeah, like, just aside from the political point scoring, it was a pretty decent series. They put a lot of effort into getting it to look right. I will say, though, they fucked over a lot of the people that, you know, that they spoke to. Like, some of the firefighters' families, they got basically... They barely saw $1 out of the production. But, you know, capitalism is as capitalism does. Fuck over the victims and then tell their story and get lauded for being a hero for doing it. If we fish in that river, we'll catch a three-eyed Simpsons fish? Maybe. Used to watch it because it essentially exists to scaremonger. Yeah, that's also a problem. Scaring normies away from based nuclear power. Fucked over their own writing crew anyway. Yeah, I'm not surprised, honestly. Not surprised. Still got some forward speed to kill, looking at my little hover indicator there. So these are all just auto-gen buildings. Some are pretty close to what you'd expect to see here, a lot of them aren't. Would like some custom scenery that extends this far south, but I don't know if anyone will make it. There are also a few landmarks missing from Pripyat, which I was surprised by. The cafe's not in the scenery, or at least I never saw it. Maybe I'll see it in a helicopter, but I couldn't see it from an aircraft, like a fixed-wing aircraft. And the cafe is one of the most beautiful parts of Pripyat, with the stained glass windows, which some very based people were sneaking into the zone to repair and restore. You know, risking a lot of legal trouble if they got caught, but they were sneaking into the zone to save the windows in the cafe. Alright, we're going to just hold here on the ground for a moment. I'm not going to bother switching scenes or muting or whatever. So just be a moment. I'll grab a cup of tea. Aren't here to kill dogs or anything? Nah. I'm really tempted to adopt a Chernobyl puppy. I'm so tempted. Like, no joke. But I'm so irresponsible, I can't even look after myself, so I kind of, like, I desperately want a pet that actually lives with me, as opposed to living with my parents out at the farm that I only get to see every couple of months, but I don't know. It's a lot of responsibility to take on. We'll see. Get a cat. My flat is not very cat friendly. Also, I'm allergic. I do have cats. They live at the farm because I'm allergic. Also, they're half feral. But yeah, like if I get something, maybe like a small dog or something. Ferret. Ferret would be pretty funny. I like rabbits, but rabbits are kind of hard to look after because they belong to the Drop Dead Society. You know, the slightest thing goes wrong and they're, you know, very, very expensive pet bills. Or vet bills, even, because, you know, they're still kind of treated as an exotic pet, so you get charged the fucking exotic rate. Dogs are a lot of work. Depends on the dog. Huskies are a fucking shit ton of work. Ask me how I know. Working dogs usually aren't. Kelpies are pretty easygoing, you just need to make sure they get enough exercise. But the Chernobyl dogs would be pretty low maintenance because they've lived in Chernobyl for 40 years without too much human assistance. And they're cute. They're like this weird mishmash of all these different breeds because it's just the dogs that were left behind, right? But yeah, they adopt them out now as a way to support the efforts of the people that kind of look after them, keep them tagged, keep the population kind of at a healthy number. And I watched a video on them, they're so cute. Huskies are insane, 5-mile run is a warm-up for them. Yes, our Husky Minsky, she thought she was a wolf, she probably was half wolf. She would escape no matter, like, you could put her in fucking Alcatraz, she would find a way out. One time she got out and we found her 50 miles away on the other side of Edmonton. Like, she's just nuts. Put googly eyes on my fridge, it's a very low maintenance pet. I like that idea, that's a good one. Actually, I would like to have some sort of pet insect slash arthropod, but terrariums cost a fuck ton and I've got nowhere to put one. And they're very maintenance intensive. Like, the terrariums themselves are very maintenance intensive. Plus, I don't want to risk somebody having a bug bomb go off in, you know, an apartment upstairs or next door or something, and some of it leaking through and killing my pet. But I like bugs. Bugs are cool. Get a snake. It's the same problem though. You're back to the terrarium issue. There's plenty of wild snakes around here, mostly highly venomous ones. They're not that much of an issue though. People play up the dangerous wildlife thing so much. It's not that bad. Most of it's not aggressive. A lot of the time you don't even see it. Like, I've seen 2 snakes in the wild since I moved here. I've lived here for nearly 30 years at this point. Well, okay, not quite, like 20-something years. And I've seen 2 snakes in the wild. One was a python, so it's basically harmless to humans anyway. And the other one was a brown snake that I nearly trod on. But because it was on an open footpath, it saw me coming, it didn't panic, and it just kind of looked at me funny and slithered off. Didn't even hiss at me or anything. Brown snakes have a reputation of being hyper-aggressive, and they're like, I think, the 2nd or 3rd most venomous snake in the world, so you don't want to get bit by one. But from my sample size of 1, they're not aggressive at all. They're chill. They just sit there and vibe. The reason people probably think they're aggressive is because most people are going to tread on them in the grass where they can't see the snake and the snake can't see them, and the snake panics. But if it sees you coming, it just kind of looks at you and goes, oh, slithers off. Some pigeons. I mean, I could befriend some of the local magpies. I couldn't keep them as pets, so I'm pretty sure that's illegal. But you can definitely befriend the magpies. It's the right time of year to do it too. You befriend the magpies now, and give them food they can take to their hatchlings, and when swooping season comes, they will not bother you. I did have a pet fish for a while. One of the bulgy-eyed goldfish. He's pretty cool. He didn't live very long, though. I don't know if, like, there was something in the water or whatever. I felt kind of bad about that. Like, fish are cool, but they're super high maintenance and super sensitive to water conditions. It's a problem with a lot of pets like that, is they're really cool and I really like them, but I would feel so horrible if anything happened to them. And like I said, I can barely look after myself, so I need something that's low maintenance and won't shit the bed and die if I forget to feed it at the exact right time, or if, like, the water salinity is 0.5% out of whack or something like that. And now I've moved, so my track R is going to be all out of whack. Alright, let's get going again. This thing is so pleasant and easy to fly. It's very hands-on. Doesn't have any, that I'm aware of, any you know, stability augmentations. There's no autopilot, nothing like that. I'm pretty sure it's just raw, hands-on. You've got your trim hat, obviously, but that's all you've got. But it flies quite nicely. It's very stable. It feels kind of like flying the Huey, except it's a bit more spry because it's so light and it's got a reasonably high amount of power for its size. And Unlike a Huey, it doesn't tend to gyrate quite as much because you've got the 5 rotor blades instead of just 2 and then the mass balancer as well. So yeah, you can see there the river and the cooling pond are actually separate all the way down. I told you a porky earlier, see? See what I mean by always checking what I tell you, because I'm frequently misremembering or wrong? So the cooling pond actually outlets further up, I think. So Kapachi would be somewhere around here, probably under one of these piles of sand. I think Skadovsk is grounded along the right bank, because we're flying upriver, so the right bank is my left. I think Skadovsk is beached on the right bank of the river, and then that boathouse function center, whatever the fuck it was, is beached further up, about halfway up the length of the cooling pond, but like on the river bank. We'll just fly up the river. We'll see if we can spot them. You want a lava lamp, just make a graphite tube and insert a plutonium rod. Highly enriched uranium, not plutonium. They didn't feed it plutonium as fuel. Plutonium came out. Playlist just making me think, we need to do some flying around Yugoslavia one of these days. I've done a little bit on stream. I did Ljubljana to... was supposed to be Ljubljana to fucking Novi Sad, and then Novi Sad to Belgrade, but I got badly lost because I'm a monkey. So we had the scenic tour before we finally found Belgrade after cheating with the cheetah map. And combining the cheetah map with Google Maps because I couldn't remember the airport code. So, Slabber, this is custom scenery. The default Misfit scenery just has a bunch of very oddly shaped and sized office blocks, including turning the radar into one. But this is custom scenery. I kind of wish there was a version without the NSC. The NSC is, like, incredible. It's such a feat of engineering. Holy fuck, that thing's amazing. Like, you look at the size of the sarcophagus, the NSC enshrouds the whole thing. The entire sarcophagus lives inside that arch. Sealed. So, you know, you've got basically a safe kind of... and it's overpressured, or negatively pressured, I should say, underpressured, so that air comes in rather than going out. So if there's any whoopsies and dust gets loose inside the NSC, it won't get out. It's basically just a containment vessel for the original containment vessel, which is falling apart and has been for years. Has been since they started building it, basically. But I kind of wish there was a version without it too, because just the silhouette of the sarcophagus is so iconic. And for me, the NSC was, you know, was only completed and being pushed into place when I was in my late teens, early 20s from memory. Might have been like during my teens, I think. So to me, you know, the silhouette of the sarcophagus has always been Chernobyl. Well, we haven't found Skadovsk or the other ship. They might be further south. They're somewhere between here and Chernobyl town itself. I've seen them flying over with fixed wing. I'd say at the moment we're probably too low. That should be water, by the way. It's just water masking and the sim is so-so. Like, this is the kind of area that inspired Zaton in Call Pripyat, by the way. Oh, you know what? No. One of them is grounded just south of the town. I remember that. Skadovsk is further down, I think. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. I just realized I had my phone turned off after I had that fucking call center call me, so I didn't actually see who that was, but thank you. Pro streamer today. So we'll follow the river a little further. We'll, once we get level with the plant, we'll hook back around and fly over the cooling pond. Human extinction finally happened. Imagine being that one alien that thinks there's treasure in it. You never know. Maybe there's a form of alien life that actually, like, benefits biologically from exposure to radiation somehow. Life finds a way. Hey, Dust Drive. Good to see ya. So all these dark patches, these should be water as well. It's just Mizf's water masking is hit and miss in swampy areas, because swamp water is often greyish bluey, or like greenish bluey in colour, and the sim doesn't interpret that as water. I think for major bodies of water they use hydrology maps, or at least some other form of separate map, kind of like they use road maps for the road data. That's why the roads and like where traffic's going in the sim, and those kind of faintly visible ribbons that are the roads, per the sim logic, don't always match up with satellite imagery. Well, you see that with river courses as well, where the water in the satellite imagery flows a slightly different course than the actual, you know, pretty reflective shader water in the sim. There's a little dock there. This is where those cranes are from memory. There's a crane there. Because I'd imagine they probably brought in a lot of the, or took out the fuel casks by barge. I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know that for sure. You'll have to look up and check, but I suspect that they did. Because it's practical. You've got a major river here. Why not use it? Water transport is still pretty efficient. If it's there, use it. Soviet mindset. That, there should be a bridge there. That's the train line that goes to Slavutich. So right about there, it's cutting through Belarus. And this goes all the way to that station there, which is the actual train station that the workers at the plant use now. The dock cranes that you see in Zaton in Pripyat are on the other side of the river from memory. Like, there's one there, that one we flew over, and I think there's more further down the other side of the river. There's the train station. The platforms have been turned into buildings for some reason. But anyway, welcome to Chernobylskoye Atomnoye Elektrostanция имени Vladimira Ilyich Lenina. The Chernobyl Atomic Energy Station named after Vladimir Ilyich Lenin. There's a big bust of Lenin outside the admin block as well, although I don't remember if the scenery has that. So some of this is still autogen buildings, as you can tell. Obviously those don't fit what's going on here, but the main buildings are all custom scenery. That's the substation there with all the transformers and shit. That's blocks 5 and 6 under construction. They were never completed before the accident. These two cooling towers are hooked up to blocks 5 and 6. Those two blocks use the cooling towers. The other blocks all use the similar cooling system to what we saw at Ignalina, which is what that pool is for. That runs out to all those outlet pipes. So this was an active construction site. BioNerd, again, she has a video where she goes into the cooling towers and explores them. Cooling towers themselves are quite interesting structures. And then there's also videos, I think she has one or two from the inside of blocks 5 and 6. And there's a couple of other channels on YouTube, mostly Russian and Ukrainian urbexers, who have got into blocks 5 and 6 and done some interesting exploration in the flooded basements of units 5 and 6. Supersus had like an entire fucking series of pissing about with little inflatable dinghies underneath blocks 5 and 6, which was interesting. So, interestingly enough, stalkers are a thing. There are people who live for varying periods of time in Pripyat and other parts of the zone, usually moving around to try and evade detection by security forces. Mostly they're there to scrap high-value, scrap So, you know, pulling the copper out of wires, that's a copper thieves are a massive endemic problem throughout the former Soviet Union. They're especially bad here. In fact, in the videos that SuperSUS did of blocks 5 and 6, you can see that they've been completely stripped of copper. Just completely gutted. Made easier by the fact they were still under construction anyway, so it's super easy to access it. But, you know, people get all sorts of trinkets as well. There's some more cranes. So those would be those loading cranes as well, for loading stuff in and out of the cooling pond. There's more there. There'd be more at the bottom. People that move back into and live in the exclusion zone, yeah. I don't know how much of that happens in Ukraine. I know a lot of it happens in Belarus, because the bulk of the exclusion zone stretches into Belarus. It's not, you know, you hear the word 30-kilometer exclusion zone and you imagine a 30-kilometer radius circle drawn around the power plant. That's not how it works. The southern border is about 30 kilometers away from it. In fact, I think it's less in most places. The northern border extends for like 100, 200 kilometers northeast through the Polyeski Radiological Nature Reserve, which is mostly in Belarus. Belarus got way worse irradiation than Ukraine did, because, like I said, the Belarus border is like right there, and the wind was pushing all of the shit blown out of the reactor northeast. The very sort of western tip of Russia caught some as well, so that it goes a bit into Russia. But yeah, there's a lot of these tiny little villages that had a population of maybe 20, 30 people before the accident, and there's still people that either never moved out of them or moved back into them as soon as they could get away with it. It's mostly old people that are kind of attached to their homes. There are a lot of people that they were born here before the revolution, so they lived through the fucking Civil War. They lived through, they lived through World War One. They lived through the Civil War. They lived through fucking World War Two. The fucking all the famines and everything. The Holodomor here, the 1932 famine in Russia. They lived through so much shit in these little fucking isolated villages. Like I said earlier, this is backcountry. This is like way out in the fucking Appalachians for the Americans. This is the sort of dim, dark places you only hear about in fiction. This is like deliverance country, basically. Eastern European deliverance country. We're only about 100, 150 kilometers north of Kiev, but look at the terrain. It's just swamp. This is a place that time kind of forgot, basically, even before the accident. So there's a lot of that. But like I said, it's, as far as I know, it's mostly concentrated on the Belarus side, but I think some of the Ukrainian side has had people move back into as well. Alright, we've done our lap of the cooling pond. Let's cut the corner here. So each of the new reactors would have had a cooling tower each, one for Block 5, one for Block 6. One of them's about half complete, the other one was just started when construction was halted. The so-called Bridge of Death, which is a misnomer, it's another thing the Chernobyl miniseries kind of made up, but it's a common misperception in the West. The Bridge of Death is kind of on the south of the plant. It wasn't actually that badly affected by the immediate fallout, and as far as I'm aware, there's no records indicating that there was, that people that were on that bridge at the time of the accident all died within days. I think that might actually be it there. I think that's the one they call the Bridge of Death, or it's like one of these ones, like crossing over here. It might be up there. But yeah, there's not really anything to back that up. There's the cooling towers. You can see the scaffolding inside that the pipes would run across. Cooling towers are basically just a massive collection of pipes and misters. Same for a nuclear power plant as they are for a thermal power plant or for anything else. They're just giant evaporative coolers, pretty much. They, they vaporize the water into the air inside the tower, and then the Venturi effect sucks in cool air at the bottom and spits out heat at the top. And in the process it cools down the water, which then recondenses, is captured, and fed back into the, in this case, into the reactor's cooling circuit. You can see the Duga radar is very, very visible, even for, you know, a good 10, 15 kilometers around above the trees. Like, it's just huge. So this this low roof here probably would have been part of the turbine hall. I'm not sure. I'll be honest with you guys, I'm not entirely sure how the construction of 5 and 6 was working out. I think they were being built as a single unit. So this is your turbine hall here. This would have been the golden corridor. And then the turbine hall is only half complete. So you've got your water pool here. This is all flooded. This is all water. There's like docks and shit down there. Supersys was riding a fucking dinghy, like a Zodiac around in it. But the turbine hall would have extended all the way to cover this, so that beneath the turbines you'd have your water. And then this is, one of these would be block 5 and one would be block 6. And they would cover this area here. So those are the actual Energo blocks. Energo block is just energy block, power unit basically. Pretty impressive. If you find videos of the interior of it, you can see the massive cutouts in the floor for where the reactor core would have gone. For, I think Unit 5 is the most complete one. It's very incomplete, but it's the most complete. No, you know what? One of these would be the Bridge of Death, I reckon. The so-called Bridge of Death. These ones would actually be dangerous, because this is the direction that the shit was blowing in. These ones would actually be dangerous, but I doubt you'd die, like, the next day if you were standing on it when the accident happened, to be honest. Turbine hall. Long thing there. That's block 1, block 2, block 3, and one end of the sarcophagus, because the roof of block 3 was covered in graphite. Block 4 is underneath that, and they modelled it so that the iconic chimney is still there, although they took that off to put the NSC over it. They had to demolish the chimney from memory. I've got doubled up chimneys for some of these because we love VFR conflicts with the custom scenery a little. It is what it is. Got to figure out how to lay down exclusions and do that myself. There's the train station again for the workers. So a lot of this is support infrastructure. It's chemical labs, physical labs. You know, it's where they refine fuel. It's where they process weapons-grade material to a degree, or at least something that MIAC can process from the spent fuel. These are walkways, cableways, plumbing. All these things run through this sort of thing, this structure. So you can quickly get them around the plant without having to worry about crossing stuff at ground level. Pipes and stuff are all elevated above the ground. You don't really get permafrost here. It does freeze over in the winter, but it's just a typical thing the Soviets did at a lot of industrial plants. Even if it wasn't a permafrost zone, they'd still have a lot of the plumbing above ground, just for the sake of ease of access. And you can actually see, like, these loops, because of the ortho projection, these loops are actually where the pipes go up to arch over a road or a footpath. That's where the NSC was actually built, that pad there, and they just slid it into place on a pair of rails. Rails there, and rails there. There's your cooling water uptakes or outtakes, I forget which. And this pond then runs back into the main cooling pod. These are all vents for the various chemical labs along there. And then the main chimneys are for mixture of ventilation and getting rid of shit from the chemical labs and such. The reactors themselves obviously don't vent anything to atmosphere. Not ideally, anyway. It's the admin block down there. We will see if we can land without killing ourselves. Hey, Indy. Good to see you. Don't worry, my memory is not what it used to be either. Yeah. I was reading a while ago about, I forget his name, Soviet, mnemonist, I think they're called, like a fucking memory savant. And he was describing his process for remembering things. He had synesthesia, which helps, apparently, a lot. Like, people with synesthesia tend to be very, very good at remembering things, because it's registering on more senses, and there's more synapses forming. Like, you remember a person as a colour, or as a sound as a smell. Like, it gives you more strong connections to trigger that memory. But he was discussing his system for memorizing things. It was quite interesting. I forget exactly what it was now, so I wouldn't be able to retell it to you, but worth reading about. That thing there, by the way, that's the concrete plant from Cooler Pripyat that I was talking about. I said that there's one there too. There's actually 2 compounds from Cooler Pripyat in here that are in... One of them's in Jupiter, I think the other one's in Zaton, and they're actually in the grounds of the power plant itself in real life. I have lost, like, 0 altitude, because I'm bad at this whole helicopter thing. You'll notice there's a big hill right in the middle of blocks 5 and 6. That's not there in real life, it's flat. The reason it's done that is because the digital elevation mapping is low enough resolution that it detected a high point on the roof of block 5, and it went, oh, there's a hill here. And smoothing the terrain's done the rest, but this is flat in real life. This whole compound is flat as fuck. You see the same thing with large power plants or factories all over the world in Misfizz. They'll just have hills stuck through the middle of them because of the DEM resolution. Something that you'd manually need to change. And there are mods that do that for various popular places. I don't think there's any that do it for here, though. Might have to make one myself one day. Really got to watch out for cables here in real life because of all the cranes. And the power lines, of course. It is power line central here. So one of the factors that led up to the accident was the experiment they were doing was devised by electrical engineers, not nuclear physicists, but electrical engineers. And they essentially wanted to see if they could use the spin-down inertia of the turbines, if the plant lost power, to generate enough electricity to run the cooling system until the diesel backups kicked in. Because the diesel backups would take a minute or 2 to kick in, during which time the cooling pumps would not be operating, which is generally not a good thing. One of the issues with what happened at Fukushima was also related to the diesel backups not operating, although I think in that case it was because they got flooded, because they were below the water level. Genius design there. But they didn't clear it with anyone, because they didn't think it would be a problem, partly because the operators hadn't been given the full specs of the reactor. They didn't realize that it would go into a very, very bad feedback loop under certain situations. Positive void coefficient, it's called. A couple of reactor designs have one. The Candu reactors have one too, from memory. Candus are kind of similar, but they use heavy water instead of graphite for moderation. But they have a lot of the same sort of problems and a lot of the same characteristics, like being very large, very cheap, but, you know, maybe not the best for safety. So, yeah, that was what caused it, because the plant can't run off its own power, right? It needs external power from grid to power all its own systems. You know, you can't have a fucking perpetual energy machine, a power plant that powers itself and everything else. So, that was the goal behind that, was to figure out if they could use the spin-down inertia of the turbines to at least recover some power until the backup gens came on. Some more unnatural hills happening here again because of the digital elevation mapping, seeing the power plant and going, oh, that's a hill, because it's so low resolution. That is a statue of Prometheus. There is a similar statue outside of the theater in Pripyat. Prometheus was a Greek mythological figure who was associated with, like, human advancement and I think hubris. I'm not up on my mythology, I'll be honest with you, but if he wasn't associated with hubris before, he certainly would be now, at least in this part of the world. So this is the admin block. That video of the Russian tanks outside the admin block, that was shot from that doorway down there. Down this fucking avenue, which is the main entrance to the plant. There's a bust of Lenin somewhere here. I don't think the scenery represents it, though. It's like as you go in on the way through to the plant. So there's your bridge. This bridge is your main entrance. Again, I don't remember specifically which bridge is the so-called Bridge of Death, but it could be that one. It could have been one of the others around here, but oh fuck, that's a power line. That could have been ugly. It could have been that one. I almost want to say it was that one because the frame looks familiar, but whatever. Bridge of Death is one of those bits of Chernobyl lore that is vastly exaggerated, if not outright false. Another one is the 3 guys that volunteered to go into the bubbler pool. In Western documentaries, there was one the BBC made about probably 10 years before the HBO miniseries. So in that documentary, in Western literature, and in the HBO miniseries, they frame it as if those guys were marching to certain death and they knew it. Now, they may have had the idea that bad things would happen to them, but those 3 guys went on to live long and healthy and productive lives. One of them, I forget which ended up with which outcome, but one of them died of a heart condition in his 50s, but his family had a history of it, so it's up in the air whether Chernobyl contributed to that or not. And then one of them remained working in the nuclear safety industry for like the rest of his professional life, and he's probably only recently retired. So they all 3 survived. In fact, if you're going to wade through the water, that's probably the best place to be, because water is a fucking fantastic insulator. That's why spent fuel pools are a thing. Now, if the water's badly contaminated, you don't want to go in it, but as it happens, the bubbler pool water wasn't. Prometheus stole fire from the gods and gave it to humans. Yeah, there you go. Which is a pretty apt analogy for a power plant, I guess. That's another nice... what do you even call that? Not a fresco, is it a frieze? Like a 3D thing on the side of a wall? I don't know. I think it's a frieze. But yeah, that's the main entrance. There would be a sign here, you know, Chernobylskaya Atomная Elektrostanция, or Chernobylskoye Atomnoye Elektrostanция. Fucking Russian grammar gives me the shits. Ukrainian grammar is the opposite. Like, as in they both give me the shits, but Ukrainian grammar and Russian grammar conjugate shit differently, so I can never remember which is which. But yeah, it would have that, and then it would have Imeni V.I. Lenina. V.I. Lenin. Named after V.I. Lenin. Vladimir Ilyich. Did all the firefighters pass, or was it only 5 like in HBO? A few of them did die pretty quickly. A few of them died later in life of things like heart disease or cancer. But no, like the death count from Chernobyl, at least the immediate death count, was not very high. It was fucking horrific, because acute radiation syndrome is probably one of the worst deaths you could possibly have as a human being. But the actual count was not very high. Again, if you go back to what General Tarakanov said, Tarakanov was in charge of the chemical troops who helped clean up. You know, he was basically chief of the liquidators. Tarakanov said that the Armenian earthquake was so much worse. It's just horrific. Whereas Chernobyl was, you know, it was, particularly for the military, it was what him and the chemical troops were trained to deal with. It was their job. They understood what they were doing. And yeah, like, a lot of the liquidators did suffer health problems, and a lot of them weren't properly recognized or compensated, but a lot of the, at least the professional chemical troops, that was what they were trained to do in the military. Now, a lot of them still would have been conscripts, because conscription army, but, you know, it is what it is. There is a statue and a memorial somewhere around here. I don't remember if it's in the scenery, though. I was misremembering. That building's not in Kula Pripyat. But what is in Kula Pripyat, near the Jupiter plant, which we will see shortly, that's the concrete plant. So yeah, from the Jupiter level in Kula Pripyat, there's your concrete plant. The one you have to go into to get the electrical components for fucking nitro. It's a real place, and it's exactly as it appears in-game. this area still have dangerous radiation? Depends. So on the northeastern side of the plant, it's a little sketchy. On the north of the sarcophagus, especially before the NSC was pushed over it, yeah, it was pretty unpleasant. You could go there, but you didn't want to stay long. Inside the sarcophagus, you've got a couple, like, 10-15 minutes exposure time maximum, and then you're over your healthy dose for a year. So they'd work in 15-minute shifts in there if they had to change the sensors or do something. There are certain parts of the plant complex that are, you know, accessible technically, like the elephant's foot, but you don't go there because it's just too dangerous. You can go there with the correct equipment, you can go there for 5-10 minutes, but you just generally don't, because why would you want to? But most of this area, if you don't eat things that you know, you don't pick bugs off the ground and eat them, you don't disturb the soil, you don't shake the plants around, get all the dust off them. Like, this area, you can spend a day trip here and it's perfectly safe. You know, there are people who work here pretty decent shifts and they don't really get too much exposure. Most of this area is not too bad. The problem is when you start disturbing things, or in certain areas which are just hot because a fuel flea landed there, or there's abandoned equipment that was used, you know, to fly over the reactor or something. So, Rasorka, for instance, a lot of the shit in the Rasorka graveyard, you do not want to go near. It's very hot. But where I am right now is pretty much clean. There are areas within a stone's throw of Block 4 that are, you know, about normal background radiation, just because of the way the wind was blowing, the way that the fallout dispersed, the way, you know, where fuel fleas landed, where the cleanup was conducted most efficiently. It's hit and miss, but the majority, as I said, the majority of the radiation blew over the border northeast into Belarus and the very western tip of Russia. So Ukraine had to deal with the actual source of the problem, which was very expensive, but Belarus and Russia had to deal with a lot of the fallout of the problem. And there wasn't a very good conjoined effort between the three after the breakup of the USSR, and as you can imagine, it's only got worse since, because beautiful murals down there. So yeah, like I said, the Block 1 and 2 are separate, with these, I think these are chemical labs in between, that's the air outtake for them. And then Blocks 3 and 4 share a common wall. So this is Block 3. That sarcophagus section was built because there was so much crap blown onto the roof of Block 3. That's a chimney, although they cut part of it off to build this. And then Block 4 and the sarcophagus are under there. Anyway, that's the power plant. Let's continue towards the city. So the scenery in Pripyat is a mix of autogen buildings and custom-made ones, as well as autogen buildings that are the correct architectural style that were manually placed there, if that makes sense. It's pretty accurate. There are one or two things missing. A few buildings are the wrong color, but it's pretty fucking close, honestly. I'm just trying to remember where the sign is. It's further down, I think. Yanov will come back over, but Yanov is, like, there. From memory. It's there or there. It's west of the power plant, put it that way. I think it's that complex there. For all my Stalker fan friends. Which is something I need to do on stream again soon, actually. It's been a hot minute since I played Stalker. Especially on stream. Catch some sleep because I have a lecture in Czech's watch 4 hours. Raging, I'm going to miss flight over Mayak. You can catch it on the VOD, man. Cheers for hanging out, though. Good luck with the lecture. It's okay, I just don't want to dwell on it too much, because it's fucking depressing. And also, my opinions will not line up with the common narrative. I'm not going to come out and say, ooh, fucking Russia good, because I don't think so at all. I don't think there's really anyone's going to win. Put it this way. nobody who deserves to win anything is going to win anything. The people of Ukraine are getting fucked, the people of Russia are getting fucked, the people of Belarus are getting fucked, the people of the West are getting fucked, everyone's getting fucked. And essentially, what it boils down to is the war itself. I mean, we all know generally the specifics of what's happened with that. Russia decided, fuck it, we're gonna chance it and roll in. I didn't think they were stupid enough to do it. They were stupid enough to do it. It is what it is. But the broader context is what's more interesting to me, because the broader context reeks of the two superpowers, the emerging superpower and the dying superpower, squaring up for a face-off. China is basically able to do whatever the fuck it wants with Russia now, because Russia has no other real trade partners that it can work with besides China and the artist formerly known as the Third World, who, you know, like a lot of the developing countries see right through the rules-based international order shit because they realize the West made those rules up to benefit themselves and they ignore them half the time anyway. Like, they don't even follow their own fucking rules. So Russia's basically got around sanctions by finding alternate markets, China being one of them. China doesn't overtly support Russia in terms of, like, sending in military effort of their own. And they nominally try and appear like they're trying to broker a peace, but China basically has Russia right where they want them, right? They can ask them to jump, and the Russians will ask how high. Your boy, cheers for the sub. Appreciate it. Good to see you. Likewise, the US is doing the same thing with Europe. The US has put the Europeans back in their fucking place. Because Nord Stream mysteriously exploded. First, it was blamed on the Russians, by everyone except the Americans, because the Americans, you know, knew better. Then when it was decided, no, the Russians wouldn't have done it, everyone finally woke up to the fact that it would have been actively against the Russians' interest to blow up the thing they were using to hold Europe economically hostage. Then it was a rogue element of Ukrainian saboteurs with a fucking private yacht. Then somebody realized a private yacht that was blamed for this couldn't have supported an operation of that scale. And now we're told it's in nobody's interest to find out who blew up Nord Stream. Isn't that strange? Nobody's interest, really. So anyway, we all know the Americans did it. It's fucking obvious. So that the Germans and everyone else in Europe has to buy gas off the Americans. So the Americans can start making money hand over fist again. They can subjugate the Europeans again. European military production is having to be moved to the United States because they can't ramp it up quick enough domestically. Germany wants to start building tanks and shit in the US now. The US is basically, because the US lost all its industry to China and India and other countries with cheap labour, the US is basically trying to do that to Europe now. They realise that they have cheaper labour than Europe, and they can maintain cheaper labour than Europe, so they're going to try and suck Europe dry of all its labour, deindustrialise Europe, and have them at their beck and call again. Because Europe was getting to the point where the Americans couldn't snap their fingers and have the entire of NATO appear and help them invade Iraqistan or wherever. So the whole thing is just a giant, ongoing, historical, economic process of a dying superpower trying desperately to bail itself out and maintain its position, and the elites within that superpower putting the crush on us guys, you know, the middle and the lower classes, to keep them in cozy living until they die of old age, at which point they don't care what happens. And China's doing the same thing. They're posturing themselves to take over as the leading power, and the US is desperately trying to prevent that because the US is shit fucking scared of not being top dog anymore. And we've had 40, nearly 50 years now of unchecked, rampant neoliberal colonialism from primarily the US because they could do whatever the fuck they wanted in a unipolar world, and they're scared to let go of that now, even though anyone with sense, even Americans with sense, can see that the world was better off when the US didn't have unchecked power, when there was a balance against the US's worst excesses. The US was better off for it, even, let alone everyone else. That's what's going on. The war isn't chiefly, because of that. The war is a contributing factor in that, though, and it contributes back to the war. They're kind of intermeshed, but they're separate issues. The war is accelerating the process greatly because the war has made people realize, first of all, you can't use US or British currency as a reserve and have it safe, because the moment you do something they don't like, they'll just say, oh, you can't have your reserve currency anymore. The entire previous economic order of the world was based on the essentially unwritten guarantee that that would not happen. The US and the UK would not seize assets if you did something they didn't like. They wouldn't fuck you over by taking over your reserve currency. Well, that's gone out the window now. Rules-based order, really. So everyone's seeing the so-called rules-based order for what it is, a fucking sham, which was essentially just a fancy lib-friendly term for the West to assert its fucking hegemony over everyone else, and continue to do so as long as possible. And they're starting to lose faith in that. It's also showing that NATO can't actually fight a full-fledged war. NATO is not even fighting the war. They're supplying the Ukrainians to do the fighting and the dying, unfortunately. And, you know, at the onset of the war, if you said, oh, the US just wants to fight Russia until the last drop of Ukrainian blood, you'd be called a Putin bot. And their own generals are coming out and fucking saying that that's their intent now. So the common narrative is a fucking media circus. If you have any sort of finger on the pulse of what's happening, you can see the narrative assembling before your eyes. You can see them making it up as they go along, and contradicting shit they said 6 months ago, sometimes 6 weeks ago. It's just ridiculous. I'm not saying that, you know, I think the US is, you know, shouldn't support Ukraine or whatever. I have always asserted Ukraine deserves to not get bombed, not get invaded, not have its borders fucked with. If there's some sort of border dispute with Ukraine, and there is, both Ukrainians with other countries and other countries with Ukraine, they can sort it out like fucking adults, not like what's happening now with the Russians rolling in. But I don't support a lot of what's going on around it. I want the Russians out. I want fucking everyone else out to what extent they can be without just saying to the Russians, oh, we'll come back in, everyone's gone now. But the thing is, like, artillery in particular, the Ukrainian forces are being told to use less artillery. They're being told to ration their artillery ammunition. They're running out. There are Ukrainian soldiers who've gone on record and said, like, we're firing maybe 1-2 rounds a day because we just don't have the supplies anymore. What we do have is mostly captured from the Russians at this point. Because, especially after the Cold War ended, the West spun down its military production, it spun down its military infrastructure, it sold a lot of it off, and they're realizing that the US's ability to ramp up into a fucking end boss like it did in World War II, a little bit harder now, because of the fucking economic system they have implemented. The current economic zeitgeist has forgotten the reason that the United States was such a monstrous superpower in the First and Second World Wars is because they went to central economic planning for the duration. Like, it's just left everyone's heads that the best way to build a superpower is centrally fucking planned economies. Yeah, they have their problems, for sure, especially the way the Soviets did it, but you know what? They get shit done. And without doing that again, which the US population and the US business community has been, you know, groomed to be terrified of because of the Cold War and the Red Scare, without doing that again, they can't do what they did in World War II. They can't spin up production, spin up manpower quickly enough. And this is just broadcast to the world, especially to China, that this is the case. China's been catching up to the US economically at a blistering pace for decades. Consistently. The Soviet Union did the same thing right up until the point it fucking imploded, right? One of the songs on my playlist, We'll Catch the Americans with Soviet Speed, the Kukuruza song, that was like a parody of that. But that's what they wanted to do, and that was a slogan, We'll catch the Americans at Soviet speed. Khrushchev came up with that one from memory. But this is what the world is seeing, is that NATO is more of a political force than a military force. They can't supply their own militaries with enough artillery to fight a major offensive, let alone support themselves and Ukraine. You know, like, the US production capacity for 155mm, which is NATO's standard artillery caliber, is what? 30,000 shells a year? Let's be generous and say 50,000 out of 2 factories. They're starting to spin up new ones, yeah, I know, but a couple months ago, it was about 30,000, 50,000 shells a year. You would use that many shells in a 2-week offensive, if you were doing it properly. If you're fighting the way the Soviets fought, which the Ukrainians still partly do, because even though they've had their military partly westernized, they're still Soviet-pilled. They know the Soviet way of war, and they know it works when it's done properly. And so they rely very heavily on artillery. The Russians rely even more heavily on artillery. They're firing 20, 30, 40,000 shells in a couple of weeks. Well, the Ukrainians aren't anymore, because they don't have that many, but... like, this is the thing. NATO can't supply them. And it's just showing weakness to China. And now all these, the global south it's called now, what used to be called the third world, all these smaller countries that have been fucking knocked around by the superpowers for so long, particularly by the US and the UK, they're now saying, you know what, maybe we'll move to the yuan as our reserve currency. Maybe we'll come up with a digital reserve currency. We're not going to use the dollar anymore, and the fucking US is losing its shit at the prospect of countries, any countries, doesn't matter how big or small or how important on the global scene they are, the prospect of them moving away from the dollar as their reserve currency. Because it immediately and, irrevocably weakens the US's ability to hold sway over other countries, and it fucks the US over in terms of dealing with their own massive debt. It's an economic war. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed my TED Talk. This is the thing we were circling around looking for. I'll try and get a bit lower so we can get a good view. In fact, we'll probably land in front of it. Unfortunately, the thing is, Ukraine obviously has experienced horrific trauma as a result of this. Ukraine was having a bad enough time before any of this kicked off. The Ukrainian economy was a fucking fraction of what the Russian economy was before the war, before the Russians started actively, before the Crimean annexation or any of that shit, because Ukraine has had a problem with corruption for a long time. Even in Soviet times, there were jokes about Ukrainians and corruption. It's, the Soviet ethnic-based jokes always had running themes, and the one for Ukrainians was corruption. But it was bad enough beforehand. It's just going to get worse. A lot of the... Sorry, the dust on my screen just under the camera. A lot of the reconstruction stuff is either not going to materialize because the West is going to start caring about something else, I don't know, Taiwan. They're going to leave Ukraine out in the cold, and in some ways I think they're already setting up to do it. Certain little things are would you really say that if you were desperate to support your ally? So Ukraine's going to be fucked 9 ways to Sunday, no matter the outcome. Even if they eject the Russians from their 1991 borders, they're still fucked. Politically, and if Yuki's still here in chat, he can probably give you even more detail on this, because there's deep lore to this I didn't know until he told me about it. Politically, they're fucked for at least a generation, because all the wrong kind of people have been able to take power and common support from this. The Russian claim that Ukraine is a Nazi nation wasn't really true in a general sense when they went in. Yeah, there were some pockets of it, and there was some kind of lip service support to some people that were kind of shady, but, Ukraine as a whole was not, Nazism. Not even close. And the actually overtly Nazi political figures didn't really have any significant power in Ukraine. And now, a lot of them are starting to, because they're the ones that have fucking stepped up and started fighting. So they're now national heroes, so maybe all the other stuff they're into, maybe we care a little bit less about that now. Of course, that's not to say that they uniquely have that problem. Russia has descended headlong into fucking fascism, and basically we're arriving at the point where before too long it's going to be two different groups of Nazis trying to see who's the better Nazi. As it is, a lot of the propaganda getting slung back and forth between the Ukrainian and Russian sides is who is the rightful heir of the Rus people. And whether Kiev or Moscow is the true capital. It's just fucking schizo, dude. It's so bad. Eastern European politics was bad enough already, but this is just fucking bizarro world shit. It makes me miss Zurich. Zurich seemed sane compared to some of these people. In fact, I think there was actually a semi-serious proposal to try and fucking make a museum to him and revive Zurich thought as an ideology. Just, what the fuck? So yeah, Ukraine's fucked for generations. Russia is fucked for generations. Russia was already not caught up to the Soviet Union. They were slowly getting there, but they still hadn't caught up. And a lot of how they caught up was just sham stuff. It was smekalka. The Russian economy might have looked on paper like they were catching up to what the Soviet Union was in 91, but in actuality, a lot of it was smoke and mirrors. So Russia's fucked for generations, because no one's going to want to deal with them after this shit, except the Chinese, who now hold the reins and will basically, they got a choke chain on them pretty much at this point. Because China's their only major trading partner they have now. And all the shit they need to get that they can't get under Western sanctions, they can get via China or via other intermediaries who are friendly with China, that China will put in a good word with them for. The US is fucked. The US has been fucked for a long time, but it's especially fucked now because they're going about trying to bail themselves out and trying to save their unipolar position. It's too late. You can't. Once an empire reaches this state of decline, it's done, dude. You're going to make it worse by trying to stop it. Like, the Brits figured that one out pretty fucking quick, my dude. It's... And it's weird because the US... It's not even that they can't accept being number 2. Being number 2 is not that bad. I mean, I would prefer that... I have not many good things to say about the CCP, or the PRC in general, right? I've got nothing against Chinese people whatsoever, but the actual political system that runs mainland China, I am not a fan of. Not least because they fucking backstabbed the Soviets just out of opportunism. I think if anyone is responsible for the state of the world today more than anything, it's the fucking Chinese Communist Party, because they betrayed the Soviets, which ended up buddying up with the West in their own self-interest, so that basically removed the only sufficient counterweight to what the Americans were able to do. China will come out of it better off, ultimately, in the long run, but everyone else has to suffer before we get there. And I don't expect, you know, a unipolar Chinese-led world to be particularly nice for, you know, us Westoids. I'm sure it won't be as bad as people make out. It usually isn't. But it's not going to be pleasant either, especially because it's like there's a lot of cultural differences in the way they think about things, the way they approach different things. It'll be difficult to adjust to. But yeah, like the US not only can't handle the idea of being number 2 power, which is understandable at least, but they seem unable to hack the idea of not being the only power anymore. Like, they seem to have become so attached to unipolarity in the past 40 years, even though all it's done is fuck them over. Oh, hey, Seb, we are, guess where? You did miss a bit of it. We flew into the Rasoka vehicle graveyard and stuff. It'll all be on the VOD, but we haven't hit the city up yet. We've just done a fly around the power plant. And we're talking about the current situation in the world, because Indy asked for some input. I'm going to sit here for a second and have a drink, because I'm losing my voice. May I ask where you learn all this? Wherever I can find information that isn't overtly propaganda. Dick Wolf, Richard Wolf, he's a lot of people immediately go, oh, he's one of them, because he's a professor with a specialization in Marxism. If you want to understand how the world really works, the grand historical process actually marches on, you ask a Marxist. I know people are going to go, ooh, Marx, political commies. Put that aside. If you want a good analysis of the forces in play, you go to a Marxist, because they're concerned with materialism, the material circumstances, the material reality. You have this much resource here, you have that much resource there. This person is motivated by that resource, they need to get this resource to do it. Whereas if you approach it from a Western perspective, it's all fucking made-up, make-believe shit, because we've reached the point, apparently, in Western thought where if you just think it hard enough, it will manifest. Like, a lot of the reporting on Ukraine is just so departed from reality, it's not even funny. And I'm not going to go into details on stream, because I don't want the glowies to get me, especially with how close I live to ASIO. But there was a document leak a month ago? 2 months ago? For as much shit as the US gives all its allies about, oh, your security's too slack, this one, it was marked no fawn. Top secret no fawn. Do you know what no fawn means? It's a US subclassification. It's not a classification in itself, but it's like a condition of top secret. No fawn means not to be distributed to any foreign nationals, including allied personnel. So this is internal US only. This doesn't go to Ukraine, this doesn't go to the UK, this doesn't go to Australia, it doesn't go to anyone. Doesn't even go to Canada. US only. No fawn does not leave the country, well, except to go to US embassies, but nobody who is not a US national, and obviously top secret cleared, gets to see it. Five Eyes is US, UK, New Zealand, Australia, Canada. Five Eyes. FV Eyes. That's the marking for it. There were a few pages, I think, marked Five Eyes, a bunch marked no fawn. But anyway, that document painted a very different image of the war to what the media have been feeding us. It sounds like it's a do-or-die offensive, this spring offensive everyone's been hyping for the longest time, and it seems to never arrive. It seems like it's a fucking Todesfahrt. It's a last fucking gasp throw of the dice. Now, I don't know how it'll work out for him, but the problem with thinking like that is, if you expend your entire military to push the enemy out in a massive offensive, congratulations, you've moved the border, but you now have no military left. Like, it's a very weird way of thinking the West seems to have picked up from the Germans. Anyway, so, like, you know, I didn't read through that document. I saw the label and went, ugh. I spoke to other people who'd seen it, but I saw the label. I just, no. That. I'm not looking at that without welding goggles on. So, there's things like document leaks. There's things like, you know, economic professors, ones that know their shit, i.e. Marxists, different historical field is kind of because a lot of them have been pushing a political agenda. You know, it's nothing new. You need to, I don't know how to put it really, you need to have a lot of experience talking to all different kinds of people, and you need to learn as much as you can. Just sit back and listen and learn the biases. Learn who doesn't like who, learn who talks to who, learn who has an agenda to push and where. So I usually try to go into things and sort of sit back and study the dynamics of what's going on before I figure out which sources I do and don't trust and how I value them against each other. But also, there's the good old-fashioned bulletproof test, which works wonders for this, especially for shit like Nord Stream. Key bono. Who benefits? Does Russia benefit? No, it hurts them because they can't hold their gas export over Europe anymore. It actively fucks them. Is it in Ukraine's interests? Debatably. Debatably, it's going to piss off the Europeans, though, so why would Ukraine want to piss off their allies? But who benefits a lot? The US, because now they get to sell all their gas to Europe, and they have Europe by the short and curlies. So, I don't know, it's hard to explain. I do a lot of reading, it's from all over the fucking place. I watch lectures and stuff when they get linked. I've got a lot of friends that are into the same, like, they're interested in this sort of thing. Some of them are more obviously biased than others, so I bear that in mind when I take sources from them, but usually they come out with some pretty good stuff. And in particular, what I was talking about with this grand economic historical procession going on, Richard Wolff actually had a lecture on that just like a month, 3 or 4 months ago. It was in late January, I think. So, it was before all these document leaks and everything even, but he was talking about that in great detail. Now, I'm not going to pretend I know everything, or that I can predict the future with 100% accuracy. After all, I'm the same moron that didn't think the Russians would be dumb enough to do this in the first place. 1970 was the year that Pripyat was established, by the way. The first buildings are laid down. It's also the year the power plant was kind of seriously under construction. So I'm not going to claim that I know everything or I'm always right. It'd be very stupid of me. I do it sometimes for a joke, but I don't genuinely mean it. But it's interesting to find people that generally do know what they're talking about and generally are right, and it's like, oh, he's just confirming what I thought. Interesting. Speaking of Marxism, actually, and people's knee-jerk aversion to it, I was watching a lecture from GDC a couple of years ago. It was from one of the game designers at Paradox, as in, Hearts of Iron, Stellaris, etc., EU Paradox. And they were talking about what they analyze for historical games, and like the balance between history and player agency. And one of the things that came up is the best way to understand how to make mechanics that encourage colonialism in, say, EU or in Vicky is not modern Western economics, because colonization, especially the race for Africa, cost more than the colonies made in exports. The European countries actually sank a lot of money and resources into colonization. Some of them nearly bankrupted themselves to do it. So if you look at it from that aspect, the way a modern economist, a fucking Western-trained Austrian school economist, fucking, when the Austrians have a big idea, man, I quake in my boots. Nothing good comes out of that place. At least not ideology or economics-wise. But under your modern Western Austrian influence thinking, it makes no sense. Why would you colonize when you can just build up your industry at home and not lose money in the process? Well, you need to go to Marxism again, and this apparently caused a bit of a fucking red scare amongst the C-level suite at Paradox, like the CEOs and shit, because they thought they had a fucking communist insurrection happening in the development team. But no, it literally is the way you analyze this shit, especially in the period that Marx was writing this. Like, in the same historical period that Marx was seeing these forces in the world around him and writing this, Marxism is the best way to analyze why colonization happened. It's not about making number go up profit-wise. It's about expanding your material capability. It's about materialism. Like, if you don't understand the world from a materialist perspective, you don't understand the world. When I say materialism, I don't mean, oh, I want the new shiny thing. I mean, you have to understand how many shiny things there are, where they come from, what is the process to make the shiny thing, who makes the shiny thing, who benefits from the shiny thing. Materialism is focused on hard, cold facts, things you can touch. It's not like spiritualism or esoteric fucking Austrian school economics where you just like invent numbers out of your ass and magically with the power of hopium they continue going up until they suddenly stop going up because someone said the R word, there'll be a recession, and then there is one because somebody dared to say the R word, and that's powerful magic that invokes a massive economic crash. Ugh. Don't start me on fucking von Mises. Anyway. Yeah, so, like, that's an interesting thing, is in game design, Marxism is what you want to go to for historical games, because material conditions, right? Material realities. Found it very interesting. Someone's going to federal prison for a while. Oh, yeah, you fucking bet. That's wild. The funniest thing is, apparently that's Yanov, by the way. Call of Pripyat players. That's Yanov. That's the water tower where Zulu lives. That's the station itself. It was mostly used for cargo. Yeah, apparently like, I was reading about it, and apparently the first Discord it popped up in was a fucking Minecraft Discord. You can't make this shit up. I mean, the glowies have been onto the Minecraft euphemism for a while, but fuck me, that's funny. I'm going to leak no-fawn documents in Minecraft. Fuck, man. This is a railway bridge here, but the game turns it into a giant, very skinny apartment. A lot of this is warehouses and stuff. There's a lot of like little quarries and warehousing and light industry scattered through the area here. It's close to a lot of important stuff. Power lines, power plant, radar, transport infrastructure, major city. Like, there's a lot of things going on here. And honestly, I couldn't tell you what all of them are. Want to visit Pripyat? Me too. Me too. I don't know if I'll ever be able to now, but hopefully one day before it's all gone. I mean, it's a positive thing. It's a positive thing that it will be gone one day because nature's reclaiming it. It's a beautiful thing. Even when humans fuck off, nature just takes back what belongs to it. It's one of those things that when I'm feeling really down, it gives me peace. Like, I'm not a religious person, particularly. I kind of half-heartedly believe that there is some power up there. I'm not like, you know, I don't really attribute anything to it, just like, you know, whatever. Because I'm from a Jewish family, but I was raised Church of England because integration, of course. And I kind of lapsed during childhood, and I've kind of held on to some of the traditions, I guess, but I'm not actually religious. But one of the things that brings me a lot of peace is thinking that when I die, I will leach back into the ground eventually, one way or another. I'm planning on being... Fuck me! Wait one, chat, if this is another fucking scammer. Oh, sorry, I was still muted. You just missed my broadside against scammers. Fucking Telstra Technical Department. Yeah, bro. Yeah, on a mobile number. Okay, bro, I believe you. Fuck me. They think I'm stupid? Anyway. Isn't it intriguing how after I shotgun out a bunch of job applications, I start getting spam calls again, and scammers. Wow, it's almost like my data's being shopped out the moment I fire off a resume to someone. Incredible. So that the company that isn't going to hire me anyway can profit off of selling my data. They can profit off of me without even fucking hiring me and exploiting my labor. Boy, I love capitalism. Anyway, what were we talking about? Fuck. Oh, right, yeah. Like, I'm planning on being cremated when I kick off. But eventually, you know, I'll leach back into the ground and I'll grow into a tree or so, or help a tree grow or whatever. And then that tree will have its life cycle or whatever, and eventually the earth which gave birth to me, through the material that exists on it, will be swallowed up by the sun that gave birth to it, as the sun expands in its red giant phase and then slowly fizzles out. Like, I don't know, there's just the cycle, like the big picture stellar cycle of life is kind of peaceful in a way. Kind of nihilistic, I guess, but peaceful. And it does make me sad to think that, oh, there won't be a lasting remnant, to show that I was here, that this was here, that was here. But nothing's going to last forever anyway, so you enjoy it while it does exist, and you enjoy the memory while it exists, and you keep the memory alive as long as you can by telling it to other people. Like, most old human stories were just passed down through the generations verbally. It's why they changed so much over time. Even before, you know, writing systems were developed. Because people had something that they wanted to hold on to that was worth holding on to, and they just passed it down, and it evolves as it goes. It's quite beautiful in a way. But anyway, yeah, I'm sad that one day Pripyat will just be poplar trees and rubble, but in a way it's beautiful. It is very much on the way to poplar trees and rubble. If you want to see it, you go in the winter, because otherwise there's just so many trees you can't see from one side of the street to the other. So the part of town we're in now, this is the area that's represented in Call of Pripyat. This is the bus terminal from memory, I think. That's that sculpture with the fucking loudspeaker looking things and the antennas. This is the hospital complex, well, part of it. So, there's a lot of industry here too, like warehouses, light industry. Soviet cities all had warehouses in them for keeping stuff, food, keeping goods and stuff so that they could distribute them to stores. This is the hospital itself, the main wings. One of them's the maternity wing, I forget which one it is. That's custom scenery, obviously. That's one of these is the morgue. One of these is the morgue under me, and then the neurological ward. The Pripyat hospital, it's more of a clinic, was built on the assumption that most people in Pripyat would be young and healthy, which they were. The average age here was like 25 or so, because it was all nuclear engineers and chemical engineers and construction workers, radiotechnical engineers. So it was a very young city full of life, and so they figured, oh, we don't need a big hospital or a geriatric ward or whatever. That didn't work out so well, because they didn't have enough beds in the hospital when shit kicked off. This street is Ulica Druzhby Narodov, Brotherhood of... It translates basically as Friendship of Peoples, but for a less janky English translation, basically be like Brotherhood of Nations, which was a common phrase to refer to the Soviet Union's multi-ethnic composition. One of these buildings is the laundromat that the military's based in Call of Pripyat. I think it's like that building there. That one there. These are workers' dormitories here. That one's got that canteen in it. This is where you that mercenary deal happens. You get the fucking key to the lab. So those are workers' dormitories with canteens between them. Slava Trudu, glory to labor, except some of the letters have fallen off. And then one of these... One of the buildings, might be on the waterfront, is Slava Partia, and another Slava Lenina. That's obviously a store there, but I forget which store it is. I think it's a department store or something. It's one of the ones you go into in Call of Pripyat anyway. Oh, there's a slogan on that building too. Univermag, Universal Store. Universalny Magazin. So yeah, that's like a department store. One of these is like a little butcher's store. I think that's a butchery. One of them's a bakery. This is a kindergarten. This shaped building generally generally is a kindergarten in Soviet microrayons. What's that? Fabrika something. It's probably either a food, like a food preparation plant, or a textile plant, something like that. What do Russians have coin-operated laundry, and what coin do they use? I am not actually sure, Round. I do not know. I assume they do, and I assume they just use kopecks and rubles, same as they would have in the old days, just obviously modern rubles, not Soviet ones. This main avenue that runs down the center axis of the city is Ulitsa Lenina. Lenin Avenue. I can speak goodly. So, Ulitsa Druzhby Narodov, Ulitsa Lenina, and Ulitsa Kurchatova, which is named after the, well, Kurchatov was the surname of the father of Soviet nuclear science, and then the Kurchatov Institute was named after him as well. For a city built to serve a nuclear power plant, it makes sense that you'd name one of the main roads after, you know, the guy that was the father of your nuclear power program. Or your nuclear program in general. Wanted to learn Russian, but gave up. Yeah, I need to pick it up again. The grammar is kind of hard for me to get my head around as an English speaker. Genders, cases, etc. It's like German, but somehow more painful. At least it's not Finnish. These are kindergartens as well. So you'll notice each group of commie blocks has green space between them. They have a kindergarten, some of them have a store. There's a department store there. There's like butchers and bakers. Everyone's on this thing 15-minute cities now. Don't even start me on the whack job conspiracy theories about that. They want to take our cars away. Ooh, it's the New World Order, whatever. They just want to revert to city planning before the fucking automotive lobby fucked it up. But 15-minute cities, this is a 5-minute city. Everything you need to live is within a kilometer of the place you live. Everything. Yeah, that's the Slava Trudo building. I thought I saw another one with a slogan here, but I might have been seeing things. Let's double back around. Turn into a pillar of salt. I probably will, Round. Probably will. I don't know. I'm salty because I care. So, Call of Pripyat, while it was the most faithful in how it laid out the city itself, it still took some liberties. It moved some of the kindergartens around, it moved the high school as well. I think the high school's a little further inland from the river than it's shown in-game. Yeah, kindergarten there. Univermag Bolois. Like I said, that's all hospital stuff in front. Chimera Central. This is, oh no, this is the high school. So this is the high school. This should be partially collapsed in real life, and it is in Stalker. So that's the high school there. There's a couple of them, but that's the one that's represented in Stalker. There's your 3 tall buildings, or, excuse me, overlooking the river. That's the cafe. I really wish this guy had done custom scenery for the cafe, because the cafe is one of the most beautiful parts of Pripyat. It's got these gorgeous stained glass windows. It's not traditional stained glass, where you have big pieces of glass cut out with lead between them. It's individual rods of glass. Thousands upon thousands of individual rods of glass to form like a fresco, but in a window. It's beautiful. Yeah, Call of Pripyat does take place here, and it is one-to-one-ish with this corner of the city. At least for the Pripyat part of it. They do move stuff around, like I said. Some locations have been shipped out of the city, or some have been brought into it, but it's the most accurate of the Stalker games, and out of any representation in gaming you see of the city, it is the most accurate I've come across. So yeah, the cafe here, the cafe is in front of us, then the ferry terminal is across there. There's like a bell tower on top of it in real life. And there's like a whole little concrete plaza here. with a pier for the ferries. Like, it's a beautiful spot. Beautiful, beautiful spot. That's the Prometheus Theatre I was talking about earlier. Prométhée, it says on the side of it, and there's there. Maybe they moved the statue of Prometheus in Call of Pripyat, because in the game it's right next to the theatre, but it might actually just exist next to the power plant instead. I'm not sure. It's been a while since I did the Google Street View tour, so I don't remember exactly where some things are. No, that's the plaza there. So that's the plaza, and in the game the statue's there. This is the center of town right here. This is the central plaza. This is the town central administration building. This is the Hotel Policia, sorry. Hotel Policia, written in Ukrainian, not Russian. A lot of their labeling around here is done in Ukrainian, because they just use the local language. That's, I think, the restaurant and the lobby. And then this, I don't know why in this scenery that's at the wrong angle. You can see where it should go there, but it's kind of curved in too much. That's a shelter for the bus stops. That's where you, I think in fucking the original Modern Warfare, you'd go up into the hotel and shoot from the top floor. As you can see, the line of sight to the power plant's not great. But yeah, that's your taxi rank / bus station. Those are your, like, water features. This is the Palace of Culture. Dom Kultury. Or Dvorets Kultury, sorry. Dom is home, Dvorets is palace. So, Palace of Culture, energetic. If you ever find photos of this building before the disaster with all the lights on it in the evening, it's gorgeous. There's a statue of Lenin down there. It wouldn't be a Soviet city without one. This is like a restaurant and entertainment complex. I think there was another theatre and like bowling alleys and shit in there. The Palace of Culture itself had a lot of different entertainment venues in it. That's what they're for. Palace of Culture in an Eastern Bloc country generally means that's your social hub. There's a really nice fresco here, or mosaic I guess it is, on the side of the Prometheus Theatre, which is in Stalker as well. Right there. The Soviets, you'd be surprised, the Soviets enjoyed their brotherly socialist competition. A lot of their fucking military design bureaus were ruthlessly competitive against each other. Especially the submarine design bureaus. Holy fuck, they were... Man, they went for each other's throats. It's kind of funny, especially, like, submarines in particular are a weird microcosm, where the American design was all done by, what was it, the Bureau of the Navy, or like Bureau of Ship Design or whatever, the naval architecture guys. They did the submarines, and it was all laid out by fucking, Rickover, what they could and couldn't do, whereas the Soviets had a bunch of competing OKBs that all didn't like each other and all would try and take away each other's, steal each other's thunder. And so the Soviets would be pressing several comparable but very diverse designs into service around the same time as each other, where the Americans had one submarine that went into service. And it just, that was it. They would design one when it needed a replacement, but there was one. It's very, very interesting difference in approach. So this was an apartment building and also had public services down the bottom, like phone kiosks. Even into the 80s, the Soviet Union didn't have phones in every individual apartment. Some cities did, a lot of them didn't. Sometimes you'd share one with your neighbors, sometimes you would have a central hub in the city which was just phone kiosks everywhere. Again, coming back to that material realities approach, the material reality is the Soviet Union had to build a superpower out of being a backwards agrarian shithole less than a century before, and some of the sacrifices they had to do to keep up with the US militarily and you know, in terms of soft power, was for people to not have phones in their flat, or, you know, people in rural towns or in their duchas to not have an indoor toilet. It is what it is. You know, at the height of its power, at the absolute height of its economic power, the Soviet Union had about half the GDP of the United States. Maybe a bit less. China's approaching the point where it's about half the GDP of the United States now. Like, it's hard to get across just how ridiculously huge of a fucking head start the US has. It's just enormous. Interestingly, a lot of flats had, like, they'd have radios, but they were all wired into a central radio, so they'd be tuned into a particular channel, usually like a, you know, a news channel or like a public service channel or whatever. And one of the guys I watch on YouTube, he's Ukrainian, he lives in the US now, but he remembers when Chernobyl happened, he was a kid. Sergey, his name is. He's really great. Ushanka Show, his channel's called. And he said that when there was a great disaster in the Soviet Union or the Soviet leader died, you could tell because whatever was happening on the radio would be cut immediately, but then they start playing, like, Soviet and Russian composers, like Tchaikovsky. They start playing Tchaikovsky. And he said when Chernobyl happened, they were playing Tchaikovsky for over, like, 2 or 3 days before they finally figured out what the narrative was they were going to tell the population through their little in-home radios. So the longer Tchaikovsky was playing, the more, oh fuck, you got. Because, you know, you knew it was something bad and you start hearing rumors about what it was. What's the channel? Ushanka Show. Ushanka is in the hat. So again, more kindergartens in front of us, because obviously a lot of young people, a lot of families, you're going to need a shitload of kindergartens, like at least one every micro round. So again, Prometheus Theatre, Hotel Policia, Town Administration to our right of that, Palace of Culture, Entertainment Complex, more apartments. There's the infamous apartments with the Soviet like coat of arms. Here's the fairground. This was slated to open on May Day, so it never actually opened. There's a Ferris wheel, the Dodgem cars, the shooting gallery. That's a shooting gallery down there. And then as you get to the northern side of town, some of the more iconic buildings are hit and miss with custom scenery or not. This is the Avant-Garde Stadium. I forget what that building is. Somewhere here, it's a little on the western side of town, is the KBO, it's called. I forget what it stands for. But the KBO is there's another, that should be a kindergarten, it just hasn't rendered into autogen buildings because of the trees blocking it. That, I forget what building that is. A lot of the northern side of town, I don't remember which building is which, I'm going to be honest with you. There was another hospital as well, which I think was somewhere over here, but it was like a more specialized hospital. That's Jupiter. That's the Jupiter factory there. We'll come back to that in a minute. So there's the KBO, the Jubilee Center. I think, actually, that might be Jubilee. Jubilee is one of the buildings on the north side from memory. I think the KBO in this does have a custom model, but I can't recall for certain. A lot of this is like light industry, garages, like transportation hubs. I forget what that building is. The Lazurny Pool should have its own model, I'm pretty sure, and it's somewhere on the west side of town. I think it's the northwest. And that was still in use into the 90s, like I said. The liquidators and the on-site staff for the power plant were using it for a very long time. Some of these will be service complexes, like all of these smaller buildings in amongst the apartments will be things like heat exchangers for the central heating. There'll be water pumping stations, substations, things like that. If any of you have played Workers and Resources, you'll know. That is something I do need to play on stream sometime as well. That's not Lazurny, I don't think. I thought it was further... I thought it was further west. It could be. Let's fly low and check it out. Lazurny should have a sign on it, I think. Should be able to see the interior. Nope. No, I see VTO and then looks like a P. That'll be the bus stop. Avto... Fuck, what's the word? Anyway, bus stop. Bus terminal, so I was right the first time. So in Kula Pripyat, the KBO is modeled as being like over here, but it's further west. This stuff is just outside the accessible area of Call of Pripyat. It cuts off like here, on the other side of Prometheus. But this was represented in Shadow of Chernobyl and Clear Sky, just not super accurate. Like, this was pretty accurate, but the buildings around it weren't. Oh, there we go. That's Lazurny there. That's the swimming pool there. I think? Or no. No, that's the other thing. There's like 3 different buildings that have the same architectural style. Bear with me. That might be another bus terminal, looking at the writing as I went past. Catch you later, round. Sleep all, man. Thanks for stopping by. It's good to catch up with you. Get a little lower so I can actually read the writing. A lot of these taller apartments, like those ones, are fairly unique structures, and so they're represented accurately. Like, the dude that made the scenery actually built custom assets for them, because they're very distinctive. But you can see a lot of these are just auto-gen, because it saves time and effort, I guess, and file size. I'd like to see a fully custom rebeak of this scenery, though, with, like, everything done by hand. Maybe ported from Workers and Resources or something. People have rebuilt the city in Workers and Resources. It's pretty impressive. Oh no, that is Lazurny. Sorry. It's a bigger building than I remember. Plavatilny... If I can avoid crashing here. Plavatilny Basin. Swimming pool. Lazurny. Azure, basically that means. You know, blue. There's the clock. Yeah. Yeah, the Soviets were kind of... There was a lot of indecision about what to do. There was a lot of... you know, a lot of people, when there's a major disaster, this isn't exclusive to the Soviet system, although the Soviet system, the way it worked, didn't really help with this. When there's a disaster, there's a lot of denial, because you kind of look at the scale and go, oh, it can't be that bad. Surely it can't be that bad. No, they're exaggerating. It can't be that bad. Then you find out it's worse. And by the time you find out it's worse, you should have acted days ago. But once they actually made the decision to evacuate, they were quick about it. Like, that's the thing. When the Soviets got off their fucking arse and did something, they were good at doing it. In some cases, that's a bad thing, because the thing they did was a bad thing, like, you know, all the mass fucking internal deportations, under Stalin in particular. But, you know, when they wanted to evacuate the city, and they got round to it, they did. This is garages. These are all garages, so this would be used to keep cars in for the people that own them, various bits of equipment, overflow for things that won't fit in your flat. Each flat complex, each micro-rayon would have its own group of garages, so there's some there, there'll be some around the other ones, kind of on the south of the city, and those are used to store stuff in. You don't keep your car where you live, you keep your car within walking distance of where you live. Now, of course, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, people started getting more cars, and they started getting more impatient, and so they just started using the beautiful green spaces and playgrounds in the middle of the apartment blocks as parking lots, and it turned them into muddy hellholes. Like, a lot of the grim appearance of commie blocks is not because of commie blocks themselves, it's because of how neglected they've been for the past half a century. When they were first built, there were these beautiful gleaming white concrete buildings, beautiful parkland between them, and now it's just gone to shit. So anyway, I said we'd hit up Jupiter. There is Jupiter, let's hit it up. Jupiter was an electronics factory, radio electronics, building radar components, radio components for the military, civilian electronics too, TVs, things like that. But a lot of military stuff went on there, so it was quite high security. The city is already high security because it serves a nuclear power plant, so, you know, why not concentrate spicy things in one area? As you can see, the layout is exactly as represented in Call of Pripyat. All they've done is, in Call of Pripyat, they moved it. So it's actually right here on the outskirts of the city, as you can see. This also had some robotics research being done in it. which was very important after the disaster. They moved a lot of the scientific effort both to interpret what was going on and to build robots to clean things up. Levitating building there, interesting. They did a lot of that here at Jupiter. So this is obviously the main factory floor here. The interior layout's probably similar to what Call of Pripyat has, especially for the admin blocks and the laboratories. The main factory floor, put it this way, I've seen no evidence that the tunnel system is real. It would no doubt have a bunker. Why is it levitating? Any large Soviet industrial economic concern had a nuclear fallout shelter, some of them bigger than others. Some of them were designed to house like tens of thousands of people. Soviet cities had massive bunkers in certain areas to house people in the event of a civil defense situation. The Moscow metro had entire tunnels that were built during World War II and then just used as bunkers for civil defense or for the Soviet military's command structure. The Moscow PVO district had its headquarters in one of the metro tunnels for a while. The Central Archives of the Soviet military had a separate metro tunnel they used to store things, so, you know, if war broke out, their archives would be safe. So there's a lot of impressive infrastructure you don't see from the surface, but I think not quite to the level that Call of Pripyat depicted. So that's a city. Yeah, about 50,000 people. It's not a very big city because it's very dense, as Soviet planned cities tend to be, because you don't want a city that sprawls. A city that sprawls is the opposite of good. You know, a city that sprawls means you rely on either a ridiculous investment on public transport, which nobody could do, or you rely on cars, which the Soviets couldn't do, because A, they couldn't produce enough, and B, it was antithetical to their idea of how society should work, and they were correct about urban planning anyway. You know, it's pretty hard to argue the Soviets weren't on top of urban planning as far back as the 60s. A lot of the theories that the West is starting to come out with now, 15-minute cities, one-way zones to stop non-local traffic, so people can come back into the streets and have market stalls and kids playing soccer and whatever. It's just half measures compared to what the Soviets used to do with their planned cities. It took them a while to perfect the formula, but when they did, it was pretty impressive. Are they the most unique or amazing places to live? No, people have complaints. Commie blocks tend to be noisy, they're poorly insulated, especially on the upper floors, so the heat gets out of them in the winter. Like, they're not, you know, perfect, but they're solidly built. They were supposed to be temporary housing. You know, when the Soviets achieved true communism, they were going to build proper houses for every family. This was temporary housing, and even after years of abandonment, most of it's still standing. And a lot of them are still structurally safe enough that if you wanted to, you could just renovate them and move back into them. Like, they're not the sexiest places to live, but they're a fucking solid place to live. They're better than anything I've lived in since I moved out of my parents' place, put it that way. And the cities are designed around humans, not cars. And a logistics network that actually makes sense. Now, whether you have the supplies for that logistics network to distribute is a completely different matter, and that's where we get into some of the issues that you run into with a planned economy, especially when your planned economy is, shall we say, relying on the human factor to figure out who needs what, where, and in what quantities. It's one of the great tragedies of the Soviets from, I guess, their perspective, or anyone that kind of saw any benefit in what they were doing socially. And the Chileans had the same problem, a couple other countries had the same problem. They were moving towards computerizing everything. The Chileans nearly invented their own internet before the US did. The Soviets nearly invented their own internet before the US did. The Brits, well, the Brits could have, but they said no, and then all the British engineers that were capable of doing it fucked off to Chile to do it for them. They wanted to have, you know, a networked system of computers that would work out the economic needs of the country. Gosplan 2, you know, unlike Web 2.0, is meant to be like Gosplan 2.0. And like the internet, it was a state enterprise. The internet would not exist if DARPA didn't fucking do it. You know, like they had private firms like AT&T and so on involved on the technical side, but the private side would not do it without the government paying for it. because it was just, they saw it as useless, they saw it as too big of a risk. Like, what the fuck do you want this for? It's pointless. How can I make money off of it? And how wrong they were, because boy is the internet a fucking gold mine for making number go up. And not always for good reasons. But anyway, yeah, that's Pripyat. Hope you guys enjoyed the little kind of tour-ish thing we had. You know, hopefully you learnt something. Maybe. Now, if I was in something that was a bit faster, we could fly to Slavutich, which was the city built to house all the people that were evacuated from Pripyat and continue to work at the various concerns here, including Jupiter, which stayed open for a while. But in this thing, it would take probably over an hour to get there. So we'll do that another day. I'm just going to do a little bit of a U-turn up here at this bend in the river, and then we'll land maybe in the central plaza. And then we'll move on to our next flight after I ditch my jumper, because I'm getting fucking overheated. Starting to warm up a bit. Well, my PC's starting to warm up is probably more what's going on. As I said, there's some of the iconic shipwrecks on the river are actually visible in the sim, but you have to be a little higher up to see them. When you're low down, the water shaders kind of hide the ground textures underneath, but you can see them. You can see the Skadovsk, which is a real thing. The swamp icebreaker from Call of Pripyat is a real thing. From memory, it's a little further down the river that way, near Chernobyl proper. And the houseboat-looking thing, which I don't remember if it's represented in the game. I don't think it is. But that's a little downriver from the cafe, I think, from the ferry terminal. As with many, relatively important Soviet cities, this didn't just have regular ferries, this had high-speed fucking hydrofoil ferries. The Raketa ferry running to it. So while road and rail access from Kiev wasn't the best, which is kind of the point, because, it's supposed to be a closed city, you could hop on the Raketa and just whiz up and down the Dnieper River. I wonder if actually these buildings have collision. We'll see if we can land on the roof of the Policia. I don't expect I'll be able to, but we'll see. We'll try our luck. There are various sites up on the internet, mostly, sort of kept running by people that lived in Pripyat before the accident. And they've got all these photos that they uploaded of different social events, of the town while it was being built, what life was like, and it was a beautiful city, man. Absolutely beautiful city. I know the architecture's not for everyone, but I personally like it. But it was so vibrant and full of life. Like I said, the average population age was fucking 25. It was full of young families. Not just young families, but really young, highly educated families as well, from all over the Soviet Union. Oh, I'm not going to do another leg over there, because it'll just complicate my landing even more, but there's a slogan on top of the hospital, the main wing of the hospital too. Zdrovia Narodu, I'm probably butchering the grammar, but Zdrovia Narodu Bogatstvo Kraini. The health of the people is the wealth of the nation, which is also visible in Stalker Call of Pripyat. It's also written in Ukrainian from memory. Like, a lot of the stuff in the city is written in Ukrainian because it's a Ukrainian city. The Soviet Union originally had a policy called Korenizatsiya. Oh my god, I didn't even notice that before. Had a policy called Korenizatsiya, it was a decree that all Soviet republics would chiefly teach and use their native language, with Russian as a second language. Unfortunately, that got reversed under Stalin, along with many other revolutionary ideals. Stalin basically undid a lot of the progress of the revolution and reinstated a lot of the shit that the revolution had fought to get rid of in the first place, unfortunately. Yeah, there's no collision. Unfortunate. I would like to land on the roof, because that's a beautiful view. Especially now the weather's clearing up. Well, let's land next to Lenin. Look at that, man. Beautiful. Like, I'm not running reshade or anything, just the beautiful, vibrant green trees. Now, I need to remember, this thing has VRS now, so I can't get too carried away with dropping the collective in a hurry. Also, I need to trim. Restaurant, that says restaurant. So yeah, there's a restaurant there. There's another building around here with a sign that says Gastronom, which is like a different kind of restaurant. Yeah, this is pretty much how it looks. Most of these trees in real life are poplar trees, not whatever these are. So it's all poplar trees pretty much in this area. And you can see the fresco in the Palace of Culture. There's a lot of those here. Like I said, it's a real shame that the Waterfront Cafe isn't represented with a custom asset, because the windows on that are just gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. It's funny, you know, the idea of Soviet communism took the place of religion in the Soviet Union. It took the role that religion previously held, as a way of kind of preserving a public spirit, a sense of unity and a sense of purpose and a sense of some grand destiny. Like, religion and political, like, revolutionary political ideologies are often interchangeable. Fascism did the same thing in Germany during, you know, the 30s and 40s. But it's interesting that while the Soviet view of communism took the place of religion, it took over from Russian Orthodoxy and, you know, Islam and Buddhism and all the Judaism and everything else in the Soviet Union. It inherited its own religious iconography. Instead of crucifixes, you have statues of Lenin. Instead of stained glass church windows depicting the saints, you have beautiful frescoes and friezes and things depicting socialist, realist murals showing the progress of science and culture and, you know, the people in the army being united in their struggle to preserve it. Like, it's you can draw the parallels directly because they are direct parallels. They serve the same social purpose. Anyway, let's shut this baby down. I do have FS Realistic, so if I could actually get it to bind to control to walk, we could get out and do the FPS walking around thing, but I still have not figured out how to get it to actually bind to control. I think I have to unplug all my HOTAS inputs, because every time I go to bind it, it picks up a sensor. Like, it'll pick up a sensor that has just the slightest blip of noise, and I can't bind a key. It's really annoying, because I'd love, more, you know, here more than anywhere, I'd love to be able to get out the helicopter and do the little FPS walk around thing, but maybe another time. So we'll shut that down. We will shut down the alternator, the transponder. Don't know if I can shut that down independently, to be honest, so we'll just leave it. Alternator can go off. Fuel pump can go off. Dash lights can go off. The doors, they're off already. We remove them. Landing light should probably stay until I shut it down. And then fuel shut off. Governor off. You kind of need an opiate for the masses, so to speak, because the majority of people don't have the time or energy or academic inclination or philosophical inclination to get really into why, or like the hows and the whys of things. So you need some, like, not to sound elitist, but you need some dumbed down, mass consumer friendly version of what you're trying to get them to do, right? And that's basically what that role is for religion or some sort of very publicly represented ideological symbols like this. You see it in the West too, it's just more subtle, and because it's us, we don't see it. Well, some of us do, but a lot of people in the West don't realize that the West has iconography just like this. They just don't understand when they're looking at it. And it's different as well, because a lot of it's corporate in nature rather than state. I'm not sure what RPM I can pull the rotor brake at, so let's just say, fuck it. I'm sure it'll be fine. And there we go. There's our beautiful little Mini 500. Let me just... for scale. Lenin for scale. There we go. Let's get one with the... Oh, the hotel's floating. A lot of the scenery is kind of floating slightly. You don't notice it from the air, but you sure do from the ground. Hang on. Camera controls are a little awkward. There we go. And this scenery came out pretty soon after the sim as well. Like, it's been out for years. Don't think it's ever been updated, to be fair, but it's a pretty impressive effort, honestly.